Hey everyone, welcome back. Chapters 1281 through 1300 of the previous episode. Qin successfully navigates the perilous Grand Extremes mine within the ancestral court, surviving its lethal transformations and the remnants of the prehistoric masters of creation. During his exploration, he encounters the scholar Tai Yi, a mysterious figure who provides cryptic warnings and insight into the nature of the ancestral court and the ancient gods. The tension between the 10 celestial venerables reaches a boiling point. Celestial Venerable Hao, severely weakened but hiding his true state, becomes the target of both the Grand Emperor and various celestial venerables seeking to eliminate him. Qin utilizes this discord, employing the Glassy Sky Pagoda, a supreme treasure, to outmaneuver his enemies and rescue survivors of the ancient disasters. Throughout these conflicts, Qin continues his research into the Great Tao runes, steadily perfecting his understanding of the unchanging substance and the path of creation. As the ancestral court's secrets are laid bare, Qin finds himself at the center of a brewing cosmic struggle, poised to challenge the established order of the celestial heavens and the ancient gods. If you're able to, please support me on PayPal to help me stay active. Thank you. Now let's get back to the story of Tales of Herding Gods audio series. The faces of the 4 sacred gods twitched as they looked at Qin who had suddenly appeared. Their gazes were slightly dazed. Mother Earth suddenly couldn't hold back her anger and smacked down with her palm. Magnetic force burst forth, and her palm could crush stars. No! Heaven Duke and Earth Count shouted in unison. However, it was already too late. When Mother Earth's palm landed on Qin body, it actually passed through his body. Qin walked on the back of her hand, and Mother Earth looked at the back of her hand in a daze, not knowing what to do. Celestial Venerable Mu, you are acting mysterious again. Ancestral God King was also suddenly furious. He was even more furious after being hit. The power of the heavenly Tao treasures exploded in the sky and bombarded Qin. Qin arrogantly walked past his Xuandu world, looking down on everyone and looking down on everyone. It was truly unbearable for him. The moment he made his move, Heaven Duke revealed a smile and said in delight, "My unfilial son has revealed a flaw." Lava Earth Count and Mother Earth didn't have any temper from being beaten up by Ancestral God King, so they couldn't help being delighted. However, Heaven Duke's next sentence made their hearts turn cold. "Let's run. Follow me." Heaven Duke suddenly exerted his strength, and rays of starlight gathered in his eyes. He shot through Xuandu world with a thud, creating a huge hole. The 3 of them escaped in a panic. Suddenly the Xuandu world shook. The incarnations of the heavenly Tao in the celestial palace behind Ancestral God King rose and attacked the 3 of them. Heaven Duke, Earth Count, and Mother Earth fought with all their might. At the same time, the treasures of Ancestral God King's heavenly Tao struck Qin one after another, splitting the ground and turning it into lava that evaporated. Qin on the other hand, seemed to feel nothing as he walked on the lava. Ancestral God King was furious. He suddenly abandoned Qin and turned to attack Heaven Duke, Earth Count, and Mother Earth, who had just escaped from the Xuandu world. He sneered, "I can't do anything to Celestial Venerable Mu, but I can't do anything to you guys?" He suddenly retracted his heavenly Tao incarnation, ensuring his abilities. He beat Heaven Duke, Earth Count, and Mother Earth until they vomited blood. At this moment, Qin leisurely walked out of the unbreakable Xuandu world and left in front of them. Heaven Duke and Earth Count protected Mother Earth as they ran. When they saw Qin from afar, they were slightly stunned. Son of Qin seems to have taken the wrong path. That's right. He was still affected by our divine arts and unknowingly deviated from the path. However, they couldn't care less about Qin. They fought Ancestral God King with all their might, but they could only take a beating. Mother Earth can't die. Heaven Duke shouted loudly. Borrow strength from the main body. Above his head, vast amounts of starlight gathered into a river. It was like a galaxy descending from the sky and pouring into his body. At the same time, Earth Count borrowed power from his body. The great Tao of Yudu gathered and merged with the Devil Qi, pouring into his body. Both of their abilities rose drastically, but they were still no match for Ancestral God King and were forced to retreat. The 4 of them fought fiercely on the plateau of the ancestral court, beating it into a plain and turning it into a basin. Qin walked around the basin and circled around it. Heaven Duke and Earth Count were secretly worried about his safety, but what was weird was that Qin Mu wasn't affected by their divine arts at all. He was still safe and sound. He is comprehending an incomparably marvelous great Tao. This state of entering the path allows him to avoid the power of our divine arts. Earth Count instantly came to a realization and sent a voice transmission to Heaven Duke. When he wakes up from the state of entering the path, he will be free from this untouchable state. At that time, he will be severely injured even if he doesn't die. Heaven Duke instantly came to a realization. Qin Mu's state of entering the path seemed to be compatible with the Great Tao. This realm was extremely high, but when he was released from the state of entering the path, he was no longer invincible. That was the most dangerous moment for Qin Mu. I'll forge a path out of this basin and let him leave. Heaven Duke waved his hand, and the mountains around the basin suddenly split open, revealing a huge valley. Qin Mu walked to the front of the tunnel, but his footsteps didn't stop as he walked out. Heaven Duke and Earth Count secretly let out sighs of relief. Suddenly Mother Earth clasped her hands, and the huge valley instantly closed up, trapping Qin Mu in the center. Heaven Duke and Earth Count were furious. Mother Earth is so careless. She always wanted the life of son of Qin, and our efforts to save her were in vain. The next moment, they saw Qin Mu actually passing through the mountain and walking forward peacefully. However, this time Qin Mu's destination was completely messed up. He was getting further away from the battlefield of Heaven Duke, Earth Count, Mother Earth and Ancestral God King. He gradually came to the desert in the east of the ancestral court. Black sand filled the sky, and the strong wind blew everything into ashes. The last time, Qin Mu had the glassy sky pagoda to protect him, allowing him to pass through the desert safely. And this time he barged in, and the black desert sand passed through his body as if it didn't touch anything. Qin Mu walked calmly to the center of the desert and came to the front of the Taiji mine. The ancient gods in the Taiji mine were astonished, and they secretly looked over. Why is this fellow here? Could he have known that I tricked him into going to the Blackwood to die and come here to take revenge? Or could he have known about my secret plan with Tai Su to get rid of me? However, what puzzled him was that Qin Mu passed through the mine and walked aimlessly into the white desert. The ancient god in the Taiji mine was in a daze. This fellow, he has gone mad from walking from the pure Yin Qi into the pure Yang Qi, and crossing the Yin Yang star domain. The Taiji mine seemed to be in the black and white desert, but when they were far away from the desert, what they saw was a dazzling star field that was black and white like the Taiji diagram. Qin Mu passed through the incomparably dangerous Yin Yang star domain just like that, making the ancient gods in the mine cry out weirdly. He walked out of the Taiji mine, and at this moment, his comprehension of the Taisher Dao increased even more. They flooded into his mind. Qin Mu couldn't help but let out a long howl. The howl was like a line that rose straight into the clouds, shaking the sky until the seals of the ancient gods appeared, revealing the backs of the worlds. His spirit embryo divine treasure roared as it swirled around him. With one hand holding up the heavens and the other covering the earth, he executed the four-faced god and executed the four heaven and earth imprints. After that, his divine art changed, and the second heaven of his divine art was executed. It transformed into the Black Heaven Earth sect, and a towering Black Heaven Earth sect connected the heaven and earth Yudu and Xuandu. Qin Mu moved with the flow. The celestial river flowed in the divine treasure realm, and he observed the four poles of the celestial river, transforming it into the third heaven of divine arts. Next, his consciousness burst forth, and he held up a great overarching heaven in one hand. It was the fourth heaven of the divine art, great overarching heaven. He plucked the flower with his 2 fingers, and the petals were gorgeous. The petals fell and purple chi filled the sky. He entered the transformation of the great divine art in one move, and the 6th heaven Yudu chased the souls away. The 7th heaven, primordial jade altar, erected Xuandu, and the 8th heaven, Permitha divine boat, crossed. The 8th heaven of the divine art was executed, and Qin Mu's body broke through the void as though he was standing on a Permitha Arkansas. He crossed layers of void and instantly reached the 28th void. He then broke through the 29th void and arrived at the 30th void. He traveled in the void for a long time, crossing an unimaginable distance from the ancestral court before gradually slowing down. However, his move was executed smoothly. 9 transformations. Wait for a look, the sound of a dream returns. A Buddha voice rang out, and he actually entered the path in his dream. In an instant, his comprehension transformed into the 9th heaven of his divine art, the 9th heaven of his dream realm. The 9 layers of the dream realm lasted for an eternity, but in reality, it only lasted for an instant. He woke up from the dream realm and pointed at the sky and painted the earth. His divine arts scattered, and the 10th heaven of the divine arts was executed accordingly. Unchanging heaven and earth will. Next was the 12th heaven, the life of the ruins of end. In the 30th void, Qin Mu soared into the sky and allowed his emotions to flow freely, executing all his comprehensions over the years. Unchanging will of heaven and earth, the life of the ruins of end. I shall forget everything, and the great Tao shall be the ancestral court. Everything and everything became the 13th heaven of his divine art, and the ancestral court became the 14th.
Hidden creation.
He combined the path of creation into one and transformed it into a great divine art. His creation divine art was like a huge bell, and with a bell chime, the divine beauty of creation was accompanied by the lingering charm of the ancestral court, giving birth to all things. The path of consciousness goes first. On the other hand, the 15th heaven of his divine art used consciousness as the path. It was an ancient ancestral court, and the forebears were ignorant. Even though the creation of heaven and earth was complete, they didn't comprehend the paths, skills, and divine arts. At this moment, consciousness was the first to be created. The masters of creation's forebears used consciousness to create things, and this move of his gave off the boundless feeling of the primordial era. Yet the Dragon Han fights. Qin Mu executed the divine arts one after another, and it was as if he had stepped into the Dragon Han era from the wild primordial era. When the Dragon Han era clashed, the paths, skills, and divine arts were like 100 flowers blooming in unison. Even though they were beautiful and magnificent, they were filled with bloody battles. The Crimson Light divine body is extinct, the High Emperor's human path is complete. When these two forms of great divine arts were executed, Qin Mu's primordial spirit and corporeal body grew stronger, and he ran amok in the 30th void. With 3 heads and 6 arms, he was like a giant that could split heaven and earth. On the other hand, the success of the High Emperor human Tao was the philosophy that the lives of the High Emperor were greater than the heavens. The heroes of the human race had to bear hardship and endure calamities to advance forward with difficulty. They had to fight against heaven and earth, fight against injustice, refuse to admit defeat, and never giving up. The spirit of never surrendering was all in this move. Opening the Empress's heavenly road, eternal peace empire will fight for it. He was full of heroism. The path from the post-celestial Tao of the founding emperor era, the calamity of eternal peace, and the struggle had all become the divine art in his hands. He stood in the 30th void, and it was as if he was standing at the highest point in the world. He executed the divine art that encompassed the great spirit of the era, and everything went smoothly. When this great divine art was executed, Qin Mu's unrestrained divine art, aura, and aura suddenly became restrained. His divine art became obscure, and his palm moved slowly. His Tao runes also became scattered. He had created so many great divine arts consecutively, allowing his divine arts to enter the path and reach the 21st heaven. It had basically exhausted all of his accumulation over the years. However, he still had feelings to express and his own opinions to sort out. His divine arts were executed slower, and the divine arts that contained the Tai Su Tao were gradually executed. Next, he tried to create the paths of Taiji and the paths of Taishu. Taisu opens a primordial flower. Taiji transforms into yin and yang. Taishu questioning the blooming spring. When Qin Mu executed the last move, he suddenly felt empty in his mind. His divine arts, paths, and skills couldn't continue, and he immediately woke up from the state of entering the Tao. He was in the 30th void, and he woke up at this moment. Instantly, a powerful force from the void came crushing over, and Qin Mu's corporeal body started to fade into the void. His corporeal body crumbled. He made a prompt decision and immediately escaped from the 30th void. This was the first time he had gone so deep into the void, and he was puzzled. Strange, why did I come here? The 30th void isn't a place I can reach. He quickly retreated to the 29th void. The power of the void was still incomparably strong, making his corporeal body unable to withstand it. If he still had the Taichu origin stone in the past, his consciousness could barely reach this place. However, he couldn't stay here for long. Without the Taichu origin stone, the strength of his consciousness was far inferior to before. It was impossible for him to reach such a dangerous place. If he was sober, he definitely wouldn't have taken such a risk and risked his life to venture into such a high void. When he was in a state of comprehension, he didn't have so many worries. The instant he retreated from the 30th void to the 29th void, he raised his head and tried to see a deeper void. However, he couldn't see anything, and he couldn't help feeling a little regretful. I wonder what the ultimate void has. He retreated from the 29th void to the 28th void, and only then did he feel slightly better. However, the 28th void was the limit of his consciousness, and his corporeal body wasn't that strong. Without the Taichu origin stone, his consciousness and corporeal body were greatly weakened. Qin retreated from the layers of void. When he reached the 23rd void, the damage to his corporeal body was finally reduced to the freezing point. He couldn't help but wipe away his cold sweat. It was simply too dangerous for him to come to the 30th void in a daze. Now that the danger was gone, he immediately began to reflect on what he had gained when he entered the path. Ever since he was inspired by Su Shanghua to enter the Tao and comprehended the 9th heaven of the divine art, the virtual stage of Tai Chi, his accumulation had become more profound. His understanding of the Tao of Taiji, the Tao of Tai Su, the Tao of Tai Shi, and the Tao of Tai Chu had also become more exquisite. His understanding of the primordial era, Dragon Han, Crimson Light, High Emperor and Founding Emperor era also increased. In the end, no matter if it was history or his understanding of the Tao, they all became his unique divine art when he entered the path. From the 9th heaven of divine arts to the 24th heaven of divine arts in one go, it can be said that my cultivation in the Tao realm has directly reached the 24th heaven. Qin couldn't help sighing ruefully. The benefits that the Grand Primordium Origin Stone had brought him were simply too great. However, the final 3 heavens weren't complete.
Tai sunnuntai opens a primordial flower.
Taiji transforms into yin and yang. Tai Shi questioning the blooming spring. His accumulation in the 3rd heaven wasn't enough to reach the perfect 3rd heaven. All 3 great divine arts were incomplete. In reality, when he created these 3 great divine arts, he had already felt that it was extremely difficult. He didn't have any knowledge to use, but at that time, he was in the midst of comprehending the Tao. He was like an arrow on a bowstring and had no choice but to release it. This 3rd heaven divine art was more powerful than the previous one. He still needed to continue perfecting and refining it. Otherwise, it would have a huge impact on whether he could reach the 36th heaven in the future. He strolled leisurely in the void and walked towards the direction of the big black wood. As he waved his hands, he executed his divine arts one by one to admire the divine arts he had created. I wonder which realm is the 24 heavens of the Tao realm equivalent to the system of divine treasures and celestial palaces? He was very curious in his heart. Compared to the system of divine treasures and celestial palaces, there were many ambiguous areas in the realm, making it hard to differentiate battle power. What's strange is that the gods and devils that cultivate the system of the celestial palaces can also cultivate the Tao realm. This is equivalent to adding 2 realms together. For example, Founding Emperor's realm is the celestial palace realm, while his Tao realm has reached the 34th heaven. He's already in existence that can contend with celestial venerables. The system of divine treasures and celestial palaces focused on magic power, while the system of Tao realm focused on comprehension of Tao. The 2 complemented each other perfectly. This was Founding Emperor's reform and development of the system of divine treasures and celestial palaces. His contribution was so great that it wasn't inferior to celestial venerable use. Unfortunately, it's all outdated. Qin shrugged his shoulders. In the future, the truly powerful ones would be the great ancestral quartz Tao system that Lan Yuqian had founded. The celestial palace system, and the Tao realm system would be a part of it. And now, it is the most glorious era of the divine treasures, celestial palaces, and the system of the Tao realm. It's also the final resounding ending. When Lan Yuqian succeeds, a grand revolution will sweep through everything like a flood and overthrow everything. Qin Mu looked down, and the majestic mountains and rivers of the ancestral court came into view. In that case, what should I do with Lan Yuqian and Celestial Venerable Yu? Should I find his broken soul, and turn it into Celestial Venerable Yu? At this moment, he saw 10,000 beasts galloping in the ancestral court, and it was extremely lively. Ancestral God King was beating up Heaven Duke, Earth Count and Mother Earth. Why are they fighting? Qin Mu was bewildered and decided to ignore it. His gaze landed on the 17th void, where the Dragon Qilin and the Void Beast Mother were trembling in Great Void. Founding Emperor imparted his Dao realm system to Lan Yuntian. The two of them talked for a long time, and this Dao discussion brought great gains to Carefree Village and the Creator on the other shore. Even though Founding Emperor imparted the Dao realm that Lan Yuntian had created himself, Lan Yuntian made inferences from one example and benefited him greatly. Founding Emperor personally opened the doors of the 3 rooms at the end of the Void Bridge, and sent Lan Yuqian and his followers into eternal peace. Dao brother, we'll meet again in the future. Dao brother, please wait. Lan Yuqian bade farewell to him. Founding Emperor stood in front of the door quietly and returned after a long while. His 4 great heavenly masters and 4 great heavenly kings had been waiting at the bridge for a long time. Saint Woodcutter asked, Your Majesty, I have been listening to Your Majesty and Lan Yuqian discuss the Dao these days, and I have gained quite a lot. I suddenly have a terrifying thought. In the future, even if we overthrow the Heaven Court, as long as Lan Yuqian achieves the Dao, we gods will be the rulers of the old days. The old gods of the old days will be overthrown by the new gods. The Founding Emperor nodded and smiled. Then, has the great Heavenly Master lost the courage and determination to change? Saint Woodcutter was slightly startled. He bowed and said, Heaven's Pavilion is worried about gains and losses. Thank you for your reminder, Your Majesty. Lan Yuqian is already on the path of a saint. What I can't do, I shouldn't hinder him. Instead, I should hope that he can do it and even help him do it as soon as possible. In the future, perhaps Lan Yuqian will become the first saint. The Founding Emperor held the hilt of the Carefree Sword and touched the veins on the scabbard with his thumb. He said, The Carefree Sword was created in the past to build a carefree village, but after discussing Dao with him, I suddenly realized that this sword isn't a carefree village. Instead, it wants me to rely on this sword to fight for the human race and all living things, so that the human race can have no worries. He smiled and said, After discussing Dao with him, the 35th heaven of my sword Dao is gradually becoming clear. Heaven Pavilion, you don't need to belittle yourself. Your 360 acquired Great Dao are for the millions of years of Great Dao in the Founding Emperor era. The reason why you are called a saint is precisely because you have planned for the millions of years of Great Dao in the Founding Emperor era. You have lofty aspirations. It's my incompetence that can't protect the Founding Emperor era for millions of years. The general situation is not with me. Founding Emperor cannot be blamed. Saint Woodcutter said. The defeat back then will be earned back today. Lan Yuqian led 5,000 disciples to eternal peace, and looked around to distinguish the path. However, the gods that followed him all knew that even if this teacher of his could distinguish the path, he would still get lost. Where is teacher planning to go? A goddess asked. I don't know, Lan Yuqian said happily. Everyone fell silent. A few gods left secretly. Lan Yuqian smiled and said, Just follow your instincts. I can feel someone waiting for me in front. Everyone was skeptical. After walking for a few days, they saw the great Thunderclap Temple and the reclining Buddha on the Thunderclap Temple from afar. The reclining Buddha was surrounded by Buddhist light and was in a deep sleep. The Buddhist light connected with Mount Meru in the 20 heavens of the Buddhist world, and went straight to the Brahma realm at the top of the mountain. Tens of thousands of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sat in the reclining Buddha's dreamland and concentrated on comprehending. Their Buddhist names were widely heard, and the sound of Buddhist chanting was vast and mighty. The reclining Buddha was very eye-catching. The body of the reclining Buddha was that of a demonic ape, and his physique was extremely huge. He was snoring in his sleep, and the black fur on his body was vibrating, like the wind blowing in a black forest, rising and falling unsteadily. The primordial spirit of the reclining Buddha was incomparably holy and solemn, like a demon or a human. However, he was actually a Buddha. Everyone looked up at the huge Buddha. After a moment, Lan Yuqian shook his head and said, He's not the one waiting for me. Let's continue walking. They walked for another dozen days and trekked through mountains and rivers. From afar, they could see the Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge of Eternal Peace. There were ships and ships coming in and out of the bridge. When they came to the bottom of the Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge, they saw a group of people tearing it apart. A young Taoist was tugging at the sleeves of a handsome god. Su Shanghua, you can't leave. That treasure is only barely worth refining, and you want to leave. Leaving us to work hard. It's easy for you. The handsome man called Su Shanghua tried to break free. He said helplessly, I have already sorted out the blueprints given by Cult Master Qin. You can refine it according to the blueprints. The rest of the matters are trivial. How could I possibly stay here for 50 years? I still have to go to the ancestral court. Cult Master has long told me that there are good things there. However, Lan Yutian also recognized that Taoist. His name was Lin Xian, and he was the Tao Master of Tao sect. For some unknown reason he had quarreled with Su Shanghua. You've left. I don't know how many years have passed since you left. Your daughter, Su Mengqing, is probably about to reach the age of marriage. When you come back, you can even carry a grandchild. Lan Yutian also recognized the person who spoke. He was an immortal from Little Jade Capital. His name was Wang Muran, and he was known as Immortal Wang. His abilities were also extremely high. Su Shanghua said, Immortal Wang, don't think about my lady. Immortal Wang smiled and said, You should be worried about Cult Master Qin. Be careful that he takes advantage of your absence to seduce your lady's soul away. I've never been worried about him aging. Fellow Taoists, I have to go to the ancestral court. The Cult Master has already asked me to go. I've always had a feeling that that place is the key to my path of Tao. Su Shanghua broke free from Lin Xian and bowed. Everyone, I understand your good intentions, but are you going to stop me from achieving my path? You can't beat me. Everyone could only stop him and say, You ran off to have fun, leaving us here to suffer. Forget it, forget it. We can't beat you anyway. Just go. Su Shanghua got up. At this time he saw Lan Yutian and said in surprise, Brother Lan, are you lost again? Lan Yutian nodded repeatedly and smiled. I met you last time, Brother Su. I'll have to trouble you this time. Su Shanghua thought for a moment and said, I'm going to the ancestral court. Do you want to go? Yes. Then come with me. Su Shanghua waved his hand and said seriously, Gentlemen, if you stop me again, you will really beat me up. Everyone dispersed in a hubbub. Su Shanghua led Lan Yutian to the Psionic Mutual Shift Bridge. He looked at the 5,000 gods behind him and was surprised, but he did not ask further. He said, These days I have been hindered by all kinds of trivial matters, and I have been unable to go to the ancestral court. Now that I think about it, it is not those trivial matters that have hindered me, but that I am waiting for you. It seems that the path of cultivation for you and me is in the ancestral court. Lan Yutian said, I have the same feeling. I feel that you are waiting for me. This should be a very wondrous journey. The 5,000 gods followed them into Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge. After a long while, they walked out from the sacrificial altar at the other end and were greeted by the seal of 10 heavenly venerates. Teacher, there's a seal here and a hole there. There's no seal. Someone shouted. The entrance of the ancestral court had been blasted out by Qin Mu when he had activated the power of the primordial mine. Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian took a look, and Su Shanghua shook his head. It's too far. I don't know how long it will take to reach the entrance. This crack is closer, so just walk in from here. There are 11 types of seals here, and one of them was left behind by my brother. Lan Yutian sized him up and said, It's not difficult to break his seal. Su Shanghua also sized him up and nodded. It's indeed not difficult to break his seal. Let's go. The two of them brought the 5,000 gods in and walked into the seal that Qin Mu had left behind. In the ancestral court, Qin Mu came to the 17th void and asked in bewilderment, Pai, what are you guys afraid of? Cult Master Supreme Emperor is here. The dragon Qilin said with trepidation. He had been busy recently and had forgotten to ask for a monthly pass for recommendation. He had only been able to take a break when he returned home recently, and he suddenly noticed that God Shepherd's diary had an additional Alliance Master of Silver. He was ashamed and had never had the time to thank him. Thank you 19 for not selling wine. Thank you Dao brother for the silver reward. Supreme Emperor has arrived? Qinmu was slightly stunned and smiled. Are you afraid that Supreme Emperor will snatch away the Void Mother Beast and take control of all the Void Beasts? The Dragon Qilin nodded repeatedly. I was just about to attack the Ancestral God King's treasure delivery fleet, but when I saw him, I immediately fled. I didn't expect to feel a divine consciousness that was as vast as a sea of smoke chasing after me, and I almost controlled the Void Beast. Only then did I control the Void Beast to dodge and escape from the layers of void. Only then did I manage to shake off that divine consciousness. Qinmu pondered it for a moment and asked, You are saying that you controlled the Void Beast to shake off that divine consciousness? The Dragon Qilin nodded. Then that person isn't Supreme Emperor. Qinmu pondered it over. Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness is the strongest divine consciousness in history. If he wanted to take back the Void Mother Beast, even if God King Lang here and I joined hands, we wouldn't be able to protect it, let alone you. The Dragon Qilin was puzzled. That person's divine consciousness was incomparably strong. When I controlled the Void Mother Beast controlled tens of thousands of Void Beasts and cried out at the same time. Even if the divine consciousness of so many Void Beasts were added together, they wouldn't be able to fight against that person and would collapse at the touch. How could such a strong divine consciousness not be Supreme Emperor? Qinmu shook his head. Even if that person's divine consciousness was so strong, it was still far inferior to Supreme Emperor. Now that Supreme Emperor has already obtained a portion of primordial stones, the strength of his divine consciousness is something that even the combined divine consciousness of 10 heavenly venerates wouldn't be able to contend against, let alone tens of thousands of Void Beasts. I know who the person who made the move is, but I didn't expect him to not stay in the celestial heavens and come here as well. He revealed a strange expression. The Dragon Qilin was puzzled. The son of Heavenly Venerate Gong and Heavenly Emperor of Primordial Heavens, Divine Emperor Lang Xian, has already arrived at the Ancestral Court. Qinmu walked around and sized up the Void Mother Beast beside him. As the God King of Creators and the son of Heavenly Emperor of Primordial Heavens, Divine Emperor Lang Xian's divine consciousness attainments cannot be underestimated, he said. The reason he came here should be for this Void Mother Beast. Lang Xian is the most ancient God Emperor after all, and he also has the bloodline of Heavenly Emperor. He naturally isn't willing to be under Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven. He raised his head, and the eyes of the Void Mother rolled up. It bared its teeth at him, revealing its mouth full of sharp teeth. Qinmu didn't mind it. Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven has suffered heavy injuries, so this is a great opportunity for Divine Emperor Lang Xian. Lang Xian's cultivation and abilities were naturally inferior to Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven, but if he controlled the Void Mother, he would also control all the races of the Void Beasts. This power is too terrifying, he said firmly. With the Void Mother, he is the strongest power in this world. Only Long Shao can contend with him. His goal is to subdue the Void Beasts and head to the dark side of the Ancestral Court to subdue Long Shao. At that time, he would have 2 Heavenly Venerates supporting him. How could the other Heavenly Venerates not be convinced? The Dragon Qilin let out a sigh of relief and said, Luckily, the Void Mother Beast wasn't snatched away by Divine Emperor Lang Xian. Qinmu smiled slightly. Long Pai, you have indeed grown up and you have done well. The Void Mother Beast is indeed extremely important. Since Lang Xian has already come to the Ancestral Court and a huge hole has been blasted open, it means that the Void Beasts can leave the Ancestral Court. I'll arrange a mission for you. Bring all the Void Beasts out of the Ancestral Court and head to Great Void. The Dragon Qilin was astonished and probed. Cult Master wants me to lead the Void Beasts to fight against the Heavenly Court in Great Void? Qinmu nodded and said, With the Void Beast army, the Heavenly Court's army isn't your match at all. However, you have to be careful when mobilizing the Void Beasts. After all, Divine Emperor Lang Xian is a Heavenly Venerate and is extremely powerful. Be careful that he doesn't notice anything strange. He walked around the Void Mother Beast and pondered for a moment before saying, Pass the order of the Void Mother Beast and gather the Void Beasts in the 16th Void. When the time comes, we will rush out together. I expect that Divine Emperor Lang Xian won't be able to react in time. The Dragon Qilin acknowledged and said, I'll get the Void Mother Beast to gather the Void Beasts while I have to make a trip to the 100,000 sacred mountains to fetch Yen.
Chinmu smiled.
That's natural. The dragon Qilin lowered his head and looked at his claws. Long Pai has grown up. Chinmu sighed ruefully and brought him away from the 17th void to the 100,000 black mountains of the Great Black Wood. In the 17th void, the Void Mother kept shaking the bone mountains on its body, and let out strange howls to gather the void beasts in the ancestral court. Chinmu and the dragon Qilin had just walked out of the void, when the dragon Qilin's expression suddenly changed drastically. He cried out, "Cult Master, I can't sense the Void Mother anymore." "Don't scream." Chinmu's expression didn't change as he said with a smile, "Continue walking forward. When we reach the Great Black Wood, we'll be safe." The dragon Qilin was puzzled, but the smile on Chinmu's face didn't decrease. He said softly, "Supreme Emperor is watching us." The dragon Qilin's hair stood on end, and his heart was filled with fear. "The one chasing you is Divine Emperor Lang Xian, but Supreme Emperor has also arrived. The cultivation of divine consciousness of Divine Emperor Lang Xian should be above mine, but it's slightly weaker than Divine King Lang this. If he really chased you, you and the Void Mother Beast wouldn't be able to escape, and the 17th void wouldn't be safe either. There's only one possibility for you guys to be able to escape." The smile on Chinmu's face was very bright, and he looked very pure. "That's because there's an existence with stronger divine consciousness that interfered with Divine Emperor Longshuan's divine consciousness," he said unhurriedly. "There's only Supreme Emperor in the world who has such a method and doesn't disturb Langxian. Not even Divine King Zhang." Supreme Emperor was alarmed by Long Shao, so he came to the ancestral court. The dragon Qilin was about to use his divine consciousness to talk to him when Chinmu smiled. "Don't use your divine consciousness. If you do, Supreme Emperor will notice you. Now that he has obtained the primordial stone, his divine consciousness is unfathomable." The dragon Qilin opened his mouth to reveal a smile and said in a muffled voice, "Cult Master, you mean to say that Supreme Emperor has always been by my side?" Chinmu smiled and his smile was a little stiff. "He was by our side just now." The dragon Qilin wanted to shiver, but he didn't dare to do so. He whispered, "Then the Void Mother Beast. It was controlled by him long ago." Chinmu couldn't help rubbing his stiff smile. He continued to laugh. "Even if he controls the Void Mother Beast with his abilities, you wouldn't notice anything wrong, and still think that you are the one controlling the Void Mother Beast. And the analysis I gave just now wasn't for you to listen to, but for him. After Supreme Emperor controls the Void Mother Beast, he will use the Void Mother Beast to seduce Divine Emperor Lang Xian. He will first heavily injure this strong enemy, and then subdue Long Shao alone." Just as the dragon Qilin was about to speak, he suddenly laughed loudly. "Celestial Emperor Mu is indeed worthy of being Celestial Emperor Mu. He can see things clearly. Using the Mother Beast to tempt Lang Xian and heavily injure Lang Xian is indeed a good idea. Thank you." Chinmu's expression changed drastically and he cried out, "Supreme Emperor? You have been by our side all this time." Whoosh! A gust of divine consciousness stirred up a hurricane and whistled into the distance. Supreme Emperor's voice came over and he chuckled. "I'll spare you, brat, but you won't be able to discover me, right? On account of you giving me an idea this time, I'll spare your lives." The dragon Qilin's face was ashen, and his limbs were trembling. He said in a trembling voice, "Cult Master." Chinmu didn't say a word and rushed forward with a black face. The dragon Qilin trembled in fear and immediately followed after him. In front, the Great Black Wood was in sight. Chinmu finally let out a sigh of relief and revealed a smile. If Supreme Emperor dares to touch Divine Emperor Lang Xian, how can the Ancestor God King sit still? Therefore, this is definitely an outcome where both sides suffer heavy losses. The dragon Qilin was stunned and opened his mouth wide. He stammered, "Cult Master, the idea that you came up with just now. The current ancestral court is no longer Supreme Emperor's world." Chinmu said indifferently, "If he goes to plot against Lang Xian, he will definitely suffer a great calamity. Furthermore, Heavenly Duke and Earth Count are also in the ancestral court. How can we tolerate him?" The dragon Qilin's mind went blank, and he said in a muffled voice, "Cult Master, I suddenly feel that I'm still a child. I'm not an adult yet, so you should just call me Fatty Dragon. In Great Void, Founding Emperor imparted his Tao realm system to Lan Yuntian. The two of them talked for a long time, and this Tao discussion brought great gains to Carefree Village and the creator on the other shore. Even though Founding Emperor imparted the Tao realm that Lan Yuntian had created himself, Lan Yuntian made inferences from one example and benefited him greatly. Founding Emperor personally opened the doors of the 3 rooms at the end of the Void Bridge, and sent Lan Yuqian and his followers into eternal peace. Tao brother, we'll meet again in the future. Tao brother, please wait. Lan Yuqian bade farewell to him. Founding Emperor stood in front of the door quietly and returned after a long while. His 4 great heavenly masters and 4 great heavenly kings had been waiting at the bridge for a long time. Saint Woodcutter asked, Your Majesty, I have been listening to Your Majesty and Lan Yuqian discuss the Tao these days, and I have gained quite a lot. I suddenly have a terrifying thought. In the future, even if we overthrow the Heaven Court, as long as Lan Yuqian achieves the Tao, we gods will be the rulers of the old days. The old gods of the old days will be overthrown by the new gods. The Founding Emperor nodded and smiled. Then, has the great heavenly master lost the courage and determination to change? Saint Woodcutter was slightly startled. He bowed and said, Heaven's Pavilion is worried about gains and losses. Thank you for your reminder, Your Majesty. Lan Yuqian is already on the path of a saint. What I can't do, I shouldn't hinder him. Instead, I should hope that he can do it and even help him do it as soon as possible. In the future, perhaps Lan Yuqian will become the first saint. The Founding Emperor held the hilt of the Carefree sword and touched the veins on the scabbard with his thumb. He said, The Carefree sword was created in the past to build a carefree village, but after discussing Tao with him, I suddenly realized that this sword isn't a carefree village. Instead, it wants me to rely on this sword to fight for the human race and all living things, so that the human race can have no worries. He smiled and said, After discussing Tao with him, the 35th heaven of my sword Tao is gradually becoming clear. Heaven Pavilion, you don't need to belittle yourself. Your 360 acquired Great Tao are for the millions of years of Great Tao in the Founding Emperor era. The reason why you are called a saint is precisely because you have planned for the millions of years of Great Tao in the Founding Emperor era. You have lofty aspirations. It's my incompetence that can't protect the Founding Emperor era for millions of years. The general situation is not with me. Founding Emperor cannot be blamed. Saint Woodcutter said. The defeat back then will be earned back today. Lan Yuqian led 5,000 disciples to eternal peace, and looked around to distinguish the path. However, the gods that followed him all knew that even if this teacher of his could distinguish the path, he would still get lost. Where is teacher planning to go? A goddess asked. I don't know, Lan Yuqian said happily. Everyone fell silent. A few gods left secretly. Lan Yuqian smiled and said, Just follow your instincts. I can feel someone waiting for me in front. Everyone was skeptical. After walking for a few days, they saw the Great Thunderclap Temple and the reclining Buddha on the Thunderclap Temple from afar. The reclining Buddha was surrounded by Buddhist light and was in a deep sleep. The Buddhist light connected with Mount Meru in the 20 heavens of the Buddhist world, and went straight to the Brahma realm at the top of the mountain. Tens of thousands of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas sat in the reclining Buddha's dreamland and concentrated on comprehending. Their Buddhist names were widely heard, and the sound of Buddhist chanting was vast and mighty. The reclining Buddha was very eye-catching. The body of the reclining Buddha was that of a demonic ape, and his physique was extremely huge. He was snoring in his sleep, and the black fur on his body was vibrating, like the wind blowing in a black forest, rising and falling unsteadily. The primordial spirit of the reclining Buddha was incomparably holy and solemn, like a demon or a human. However, he was actually a Buddha. Everyone looked up at the huge Buddha. After a moment, Lan Yuqian shook his head and said, He's not the one waiting for me. Let's continue walking. They walked for another dozen days and trekked through mountains and rivers. From afar, they could see the Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge of Eternal Peace. There were ships and ships coming in and out of the bridge. When they came to the bottom of the Spirit Energy Mutual Shift Bridge, they saw a group of people tearing it apart. A young Taoist was tugging at the sleeves of a handsome god. Su Shanghua, you can't leave. That treasure is only barely worth refining, and you want to leave. Leaving us to work hard. It's easy for you. The handsome man called Su Shanghua tried to break free. He said helplessly, I have already sorted out the blueprints given by Cult Master Qin. You can refine it according to the blueprints. The rest of the matters are trivial. How could I possibly stay here for 50 years? I still have to go to the ancestral court. Cult Master has long told me that there are good things there. However, Lan Yutian also recognized that Taoist. His name was Lin Xian, and he was the Tao master of Tao sect. For some unknown reason he had quarreled with Su Shanghua. You've left. I don't know how many years have passed since you left. Your daughter, Su Mengqing, is probably about to reach the age of marriage. When you come back, you can even carry a grandchild. Lan Yutian also recognized the person who spoke. He was an immortal from Little Jade Capital. His name was Wang Muran, and he was known as Immortal Wang. His abilities were also extremely high. Su Shanghua said, Immortal Wang, don't think about my lady. Immortal Wang smiled and said, You should be worried about Cult Master Qin. Be careful that he takes advantage of your absence to seduce your lady's soul away. I've never been worried about him aging. Fellow Taoists, I have to go to the ancestral court. The Cult Master has already asked me to go. I've always had a feeling that that place is the key to my path of Tao. Su Shanghua broke free from Lin Xian and bowed. Everyone, I understand your good intentions, but are you going to stop me from achieving my path? You can't beat me. Everyone could only stop him and say, You ran off to have fun, leaving us here to suffer. Forget it, forget it. We can't beat you anyway. Just go. Su Shanghua got up. At this time he saw Lan Yutian and said in surprise, Brother Lan, are you lost again? Lan Yutian nodded repeatedly and smiled. I met you last time, Brother Su. I'll have to trouble you this time. Su Shanghua thought for a moment and said, I'm going to the ancestral court. Do you want to go? Yes. Then come with me. Su Shanghua waved his hand and said seriously, Gentlemen, if you stop me again, you will really beat me up. Everyone dispersed in a hubbub. Su Shanghua led Lan Yutian to the psionic mutual shift bridge. He looked at the 5,000 gods behind him and was surprised, but he did not ask further. He said, These days I have been hindered by all kinds of trivial matters, and I have been unable to go to the ancestral court. Now that I think about it, it is not those trivial matters that have hindered me, but that I am waiting for you. It seems that the path of cultivation for you and me is in the ancestral court. Lan Yutian said, I have the same feeling. I feel that you are waiting for me. This should be a very wondrous journey. The 5,000 gods followed them into spirit energy mutual shift bridge. After a long while, they walked out from the sacrificial altar at the other end and were greeted by the seal of 10 heavenly venerates. Teacher, there's a seal here and a hole there. There's no seal. Someone shouted. The entrance of the ancestral court had been blasted out by Qin Mu when he had activated the power of the primordial mine. Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian took a look, and Su Shanghua shook his head. It's too far. I don't know how long it will take to reach the entrance. This crack is closer, so just walk in from here. There are 11 types of seals here, and one of them was left behind by my brother. Lan Yutian sized him up and said, It's not difficult to break his seal. Su Shanghua also sized him up and nodded. It's indeed not difficult to break his seal. Let's go. The two of them brought the 5,000 gods in and walked into the seal that Qin Mu had left behind. In the ancestral court, Qin Mu came to the 17th void and asked in bewilderment, Pai, what are you guys afraid of? Cult Master Supreme Emperor is here. The dragon Qilin said with trepidation. He had been busy recently and had forgotten to ask for a monthly pass for recommendation. He had only been able to take a break when he returned home recently, and he suddenly noticed that God Shepherd's diary had an additional Alliance Master of Silver. He was ashamed and had never had the time to thank him. Thank you 19 for not selling wine. Thank you Tao Brother for the silver reward. Supreme Emperor has arrived? Qin Mu was slightly stunned and smiled. Are you afraid that Supreme Emperor will snatch away the Void Mother Beast and take control of all the Void Beasts? The Dragon Qilin nodded repeatedly. I was just about to attack the Ancestral God King's treasure delivery fleet, but when I saw him, I immediately fled. I didn't expect to feel a divine consciousness that was as vast as a sea of smoke chasing after me, and I almost controlled the Void Beast. Only then did I control the void beast to dodge and escape from the layers of void. Only then did I manage to shake off that divine consciousness. Qinmu pondered it for a moment and asked, "You are saying that you controlled the void beast to shake off that divine consciousness?" The dragon Qilin nodded. "Then that person isn't Supreme Emperor." Qinmu pondered it over. Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness is the strongest divine consciousness in history. If he wanted to take back the Void Mother Beast, even if God King Lang here and I joined hands, we wouldn't be able to protect it, let alone you. The dragon Qilin was puzzled. That person's divine consciousness was incomparably strong. When I controlled the Void Mother Beast controlled tens of thousands of Void Beasts and cried out at the same time. Even if the divine consciousness of so many Void Beasts were added together, they wouldn't be able to fight against that person and would collapse at the touch. How could such a strong divine consciousness not be Supreme Emperor? Qinmu shook his head. Even if that person's divine consciousness was so strong, it was still far inferior to Supreme Emperor. Now that Supreme Emperor has already obtained a portion of primordial stones, the strength of his divine consciousness is something that even the combined divine consciousness of 10 heavenly venerates wouldn't be able to contend against, let alone tens of thousands of void beasts. I know who the person who made the move is, but I didn't expect him to not stay in the celestial heavens and come here as well. He revealed a strange expression. The dragon Qilin was puzzled. The son of Heavenly Venerate Gong and Heavenly Emperor of Primordial Heavens, Divine Emperor Lang Xian, has already arrived at the ancestral court. Qinmu walked around and sized up the Void Mother Beast beside him. As the God King of Creators and the son of Heavenly Emperor of Primordial Heavens, Divine Emperor Lang Xian's divine consciousness attainments cannot be underestimated, he said. The reason he came here should be for this Void Mother Beast. Lang Xian is the most ancient God Emperor after all, and he also has the bloodline of Heavenly Emperor. He naturally isn't willing to be under Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven. He raised his head, and the eyes of the Void Mother rolled up. It bared its teeth at him, revealing its mouth full of sharp teeth. Qinmu didn't mind it. Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven has suffered heavy injuries, so this is a great opportunity for Divine Emperor Lang Xian. Lang Xian's cultivation and abilities were naturally inferior to Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven, but if he controlled the Void Mother, he would also control all the races of the Void Beasts. This power is too terrifying, he said firmly. With the Void Mother, he is the strongest power in this world. Only Long Xiao can contend with him. His goal is to subdue the Void Beasts and head to the dark side of the ancestral court to subdue Long Xiao. At that time, he would have 2 heavenly venerates supporting him. How could the other heavenly venerates not be convinced? The dragon Qilin let out a sigh of relief and said, "Luckily, the Void Mother Beast wasn't snatched away by Divine Emperor Lang Xian." Qinmu smiled slightly. "Long Pai, you have indeed grown up and you have done well. The Void Mother Beast is indeed extremely important. Since Lang Xian has already come to the ancestral court and a huge hole has been blasted open, it means that the Void Beasts can leave the ancestral court. I'll arrange a mission for you. Bring all the Void Beasts out of the ancestral court and head to Great Void." The dragon Qilin was astonished and probed. "Cult Master wants me to lead the Void Beasts to fight against the heavenly court in Great Void?" Qinmu nodded and said, "With the Void Beast army, the Heavenly Court's army isn't your match at all. However, you have to be careful when mobilizing the Void Beasts. After all, Divine Emperor Lang Xian is a heavenly venerate and is extremely powerful. Be careful that he doesn't notice anything strange." He walked around the Void Mother Beast and pondered for a moment before saying, "Pass the order of the Void Mother Beast and gather the Void Beasts in the 16th Void. When the time comes, we will rush out together. I expect that Divine Emperor Lang Xian won't be able to react in time." The dragon Qilin acknowledged and said, "I'll get the Void Mother Beast to gather the Void Beasts while I have to make a trip to the 100,000 sacred mountains to fetch Yen."
Qinmu smiled.
"That's natural." The dragon Qilin lowered his head and looked at his claws. Long Pai has grown up. Qinmu sighed ruefully and brought him away from the 17th Void to the 100,000 black mountains of the Great Black Wood. In the 17th Void, the Void Mother kept shaking the bone mountains on its body, and let out strange howls to gather the Void Beasts in the ancestral court. Qinmu and the dragon Qilin had just walked out of the Void, when the Dragon Qilin's expression suddenly changed drastically. He cried out, "Cult Master, I can't sense the Void Mother anymore." "Don't scream." Qin Mu's expression didn't change as he said with a smile, "Continue walking forward. When we reach the Great Black Wood, we'll be safe." The Dragon Qilin was puzzled, but the smile on Qin Mu's face didn't decrease. He said softly, "Supreme Emperor is watching us." The Dragon Qilin's hair stood on end, and his heart was filled with fear. "The one chasing you is Divine Emperor Langxian, but Supreme Emperor has also arrived. The cultivation of divine consciousness of Divine Emperor Langxian should be above mine, but it's slightly weaker than Divine King Lang this. If he really chased you, you and the Void Mother Beast wouldn't be able to escape, and the 17th Void wouldn't be safe either. There's only one possibility for you guys to be able to escape." The smile on Qin Mu's face was very bright, and he looked very pure. "That's because there's an existence with stronger divine consciousness that interfered with Divine Emperor Longshuan's divine consciousness," he said unhurriedly. "There's only Supreme Emperor in the world who has such a method and doesn't disturb Langxian. Not even Divine King Zhang." Supreme Emperor was alarmed by Long Shao, so he came to the ancestral court. The Dragon Qilin was about to use his divine consciousness to talk to him when Qin Mu smiled. "Don't use your divine consciousness. If you do, Supreme Emperor will notice you. Now that he has obtained the primordial stone, his divine consciousness is unfathomable." The Dragon Qilin opened his mouth to reveal a smile and said in a muffled voice, "Cult Master, you mean to say that Supreme Emperor has always been by my side?" Qin Mu smiled and his smile was a little stiff. "He was by our side just now." The Dragon Qilin wanted to shiver, but he didn't dare to do so. He whispered, "Then the Void Mother Beast. It was controlled by him long ago." Qin Mu couldn't help rubbing his stiff smile. He continued to laugh. "Even if he controls the Void Mother Beast with his abilities, you wouldn't notice anything wrong, and still think that you are the one controlling the Void Mother Beast. And the analysis I gave just now wasn't for you to listen to, but for him. After Supreme Emperor controls the Void Mother Beast, he will use the Void Mother Beast to seduce Divine Emperor Langxian. He will first heavily injure this strong enemy, and then subdue Long Shao alone." Just as the Dragon Qilin was about to speak, he suddenly laughed loudly. "Celestial Emperor Mu is indeed worthy of being Celestial Emperor Mu. He can see things clearly. Using the Mother Beast to tempt Langxian and heavily injure Langxian is indeed a good idea. Thank you." Qin Mu's expression changed drastically and he cried out, "Supreme Emperor? You have been by our side all this time." Whoosh! A gust of divine consciousness stirred up a hurricane and whistled into the distance. Supreme Emperor's voice came over and he chuckled. "I'll spare you, brat, but you won't be able to discover me, right? On account of you giving me an idea this time, I'll spare your lives." The Dragon Qilin's face was ashen, and his limbs were trembling. He said in a trembling voice, "Cult Master." Qin Mu didn't say a word and rushed forward with a black face. The Dragon Qilin trembled in fear and immediately followed after him. In front, the Great Black Wood was in sight. Qin Mu finally let out a sigh of relief and revealed a smile. If Supreme Emperor dares to touch Divine Emperor Langxian, how can the Ancestor God King sit still? Therefore, this is definitely an outcome where both sides suffer heavy losses. The Dragon Qilin was stunned and opened his mouth wide. He stammered, "Cult Master, the idea that you came up with just now. The current ancestral court is no longer Supreme Emperor's world." Qin Mu said indifferently, "If he goes to plot against Langxian, he will definitely suffer a great calamity. Furthermore, Heavenly Duke and Earth Count are also in the ancestral court. How can we tolerate him?" The Dragon Qilin's mind went blank, and he said in a muffled voice, "Cult Master, I suddenly feel that I'm still a child. I'm not an adult yet, so you should just call me Fatty Dragon." Finally, they walked into the range of the azure heaven glazed tiles, and Qin Mu let out a long sigh. "There's no need to belittle yourself. These old martial artists were only born earlier than us and have experienced more things in the world, so they might not be smarter than us. If the longer they live, the smarter they become, then the bastard would have long ruled the world." The Dragon Qilin couldn't help laughing. "Cult Master, the bastard isn't the species with the longest lifespan."
Qin Mu smiled.
"The one with the longest lifespan is the ancient god." But haven't I killed many of them? It's obvious that living longer doesn't make you smarter. In fact, what's terrifying is that living longer will make you rely more and more on experience to do things instead of your own brain. When you fall into experience, it would be dangerous. The dragon Qilin felt that these words were gold and jade, so he memorized them carefully. Perhaps it can be used in my human rearing scriptures. If Supreme Emperor is heavily injured this time, can I take back Primordial Stone? Qin Mu blinked and touched the beard on his chin. The beard was stubborn and would grow back no matter how hard he pulled it out. If I take back the original stone, wouldn't the original stone I gave Celestial Venerable shall be wasted? However, the primordial stone is indeed very tempting. At that moment Su Shanghua, Lan Yutian, and the rest passed through the crack in the sky and finally arrived at the ancestral court. What a treasure land! Everyone looked around and couldn't help exclaiming in admiration. This place was even more like the celestial court. There were divine mountains made of divine gold, rivers made of sunflower water, white clouds gathered from spirit chi, and raindrops formed from spirit chi. The soil on the ground was the resting soil, and it could grow on its own. A piece of resting soil could turn into a piece of land. Those mountains were continuous and undulating like divine dragons in all kinds of postures. If there was a genius like dragon-rearing sovereign, he could slightly change the geography and turn the mountains into true dragons. There were also plants in the mountains and fields. They were lush and verdant, and all kinds of spirit flowers and rare plants were rare in the outside world. And those giant beasts walking in the mountains and flying in the clouds and mist were even more unbelievable. No wonder the cult master has always let me come here. Su Shanghua couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. He muttered, "There are too many treasures here." The natural patterns on those giant beasts contain profound principles. If one grasps them, one's achievements will definitely be extraordinary. The movements of the mountains and rivers, the heavenly materials and earthly treasures. This is clearly the land of Di Xing. Lan Yutian sensed the great Tao here and muttered, "This will be the land of my path." Su Shanghua also nodded. "I also sensed it. This will be the land of my path." The two looked at each other. Lan Yutian led 5,000 gods and walked down from the sky. Following his senses, he said, "I can sense that there are 5 kinds of strange great Tao here. They are abnormally strong, and they are related to my Tao, skills and divine arts." Su Shanghua sensed carefully and praised, "Brother Lan's aptitude still surpasses mine. My senses are not as clear as yours, but I can barely sense the 5 kinds of great Tao auras." The group followed the two of them and walked slowly, trekking through mountains and rivers. Along the way they saw countless heavenly materials and earthly treasures, which dazzled them. Some gods were affected by the treasures and stopped to search for treasures. When they found the treasures, they saw that Lan Yutian, Su Shanghua, and the others had already left without a trace. As they walked, the number of gods behind them became fewer and fewer, leaving only 3,000 people. They continued to follow them relentlessly. But it was also strange that when some giant beasts met them, they actually joined the ranks of followers. When Lan Yutian and Su Shanghua stopped to talk about Tao arts and divine arts, these immemorial giant beasts actually sat down and listened. Some gods intended to drive these giant beasts away, but Su Shanghua stopped them and said, "All things have spirits, all things have Tao, and all things can cultivate." Lan Yutian's senses were even more sensitive, and Su Shanghua sighed in admiration. They walked for dozens of days, and finally came to a piece of the primal chaos sea. This primal chaos sea was filled with incomparably ancient primal chaos chi. It was incomparably heavy, and it could transform into anything. It was extremely dangerous. Even the giant beasts of the ancestral court did not dare to set foot in this place. Su Shanghua looked around, shook his head and said, "The great Tao here has dissipated. Only the aura remains." Lan Yutian shook his head and said, "It hasn't dissipated. The great Tao has always been there. It's just that someone has used the great Tao here to become a Tao. After he became a Tao, his realm was too high and he no longer needed this place, so he left." At this moment the sky suddenly turned dark. Everyone raised their heads and saw countless 6-legged behemoths spread their 2 pairs of wings and glide through the sky. Those behemoths were slightly larger than the other behemoths. The patterns on their bodies were extremely strange. When they flew in the sky, they formed groups and filled up the sky. No one had ever seen such a spectacular scene. They all raised their heads and looked around. Su Shanghua muttered, "Cult Master Qin once taught me a few types of void patterns, saying that they contain a kind of great Tao of the void. Those patterns and the patterns on the bodies of these behemoths are like, yes, these are void beasts." He had just said these words when the behemoths near the chaotic sea suddenly seemed to have been disturbed, and they all fled in all directions. Even the few behemoths that were following Lan Yuqian were trembling in fear at this moment. Prostrating on the ground, they seemed to be planning to hide themselves. Su Shanghua, Lan Yuqian, and the rest didn't know much about the void beasts, but the other huge beasts knew how terrifying they were. The void beasts could be said to be the natural enemies of all the huge beasts, and with so many of them roaming around, they could really wash everything with blood. However, what was strange was that the void beasts in the sky ignored the huge beasts that were running down and instead ran in the same direction. That was the other hole in the sky of the ancestral court. There were two holes in the sky. One was because founding emperor had cleaved open the heaven with his sword, and the other was because Qin Mu had triggered the riots in the supreme beginning mineral vein and blasted a huge round hole in the seal of the gods. The void beasts went straight for the huge round hole. Just as countless void beasts were rushing towards the huge hole, the sky suddenly shook violently. An incomparably huge round eye stretched out from the void, squeezing the sky until it continuously cracked. The other void beasts all fled, making space for themselves. Following that, the huge eye poked out, slowly revealing an even larger void beast head. Boom! The sky shook, and a claw that was several times thicker than a mountain range poked out from the void. It rubbed against the air, causing lightning, thunder, and fire to scurry in the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The 6 claws of the giant beast stretched out from the void, and its complete body descended. It was none other than the Void Mother Beast. This Void Mother Beast was the Void Mother Beast that the dragon Qilin had controlled in the past, but it had now returned to Supreme Emperor's control. Countless void beasts surrounded the Void Mother Beast and hugged it as they flew toward the entrance of the ancestral court. From the looks of it, they were planning to escape from the ancestral court. How could the void beasts escape? Could there be creatures even more terrifying than them here? Su Shanghua was bewildered. He had heard many legends about the void beasts from Qin Mu. At that moment, a huge wheel of divine light rose and blocked half of the sky. That wheel of divine light whizzed around, and in front of it was the face of God Emperor Lang Xian. That face had a smile on it. "The Void Mother Beast belongs to me." God Emperor Lang Xian's divine consciousness burst forth and he laughed loudly. "The race of the void beasts will also fall into my control." Su Shanghua, Lan Yuqian, and the others were dumbfounded. Su Shenghua's expression changed and he said hurriedly, "Let's go. Even a wisp of Celestial Venerable's power is enough to crush us." Just as they were about to leave the chaotic sea, a figure suddenly rose from the chaotic sea. It was a white-haired old man with a cane in one hand and a bucket in the other. He chuckled and said, "Fellow Taoists, you won't be able to hide from the battle of the heavenly venerates in time. You'd beher come to my place to hide for a while." Su Shanghua and Lan Yuqian bowed to the white-haired old man to express their gratitude. The white-haired old man raised his walking stick and gently pushed it. The Sea of Chaos cracked open, revealing a path. The two quickly led the 3,000 gods and beasts into the Sea of Chaos. The chaotic chi on both sides was like cliffs, extremely steep and terrifying. If this chaotic chi pressed down, they would be crushed into pieces and assimilated by the chaos. When they walked into the sea, the white-haired old man stuck his crutch into the ground and said, "My place is rather shabby. I originally had a place to stay, but when Heavenly Venerate Mu arrived, it collapsed." Su Shanghua said in surprise, "Cult Master Qin has been here before? He tore down your place." The white-haired elder was helpless, he said. "Isn't that so? When he saw that I had placed the eggshell here, he thought that I didn't want it anymore, so he took it away by himself. However, he didn't know that the reason why I left the eggshell behind was to rely on the eggshell to stabilize this mineral vein. After he took away the eggshell, this place collapsed and turned into a chaotic sea." Lan Yuqian said with a smile, "It's my brother's style. How should I address you, elder?" "Everyone calls me Tai Yi." The white-haired elder smiled. "The battle of the heavenly venerates is about to begin." Su Shenghua's heart trembled. Those with the word Tai before their names were all amazing old monsters. Tai Di and Tai Chu were both figures that had existed since the primordial age. For the others, even the oldest ancient gods did not have the word Tai in their names. Earth Count, Heavenly Duke, and Earth Mother did not have the word Tai. This old man was called Tai Yi. He was probably from the same era as Absolute Beginning and Supreme Emperor. Perhaps he was even more ancient. Lan Yutian didn't think as much as he did. They raised their heads and saw Divine Emperor Lang Xian's soul consciousness rushing toward the void beasts that were protected by countless void beasts. Countless void beasts opened their eyes and opened their ferocious mouths. They let out ear-piercing cries and attacked his spiritual sense. But how powerful was Divine Emperor Lang Xian's spiritual sense? His spiritual sense was vast and mighty. As he swept around, countless void beasts instantly lost their minds and fell from the sky like rain. Divine Emperor Lang Xian was worthy of being a heavenly venerate. He only used his spiritual sense but did not use his magic power. He made these extremely powerful void beast strange abilities completely useless. Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's spiritual sense came directly in front of the void mother beast. His spiritual sense was as deep as the sea and surged into the void mother beast's brain.
Celestial Emperor Lang Xuan smilet.
Junior, you were lucky last time and escaped. Now you have no way to escape. Is that so? The terrifying spiritual sense hidden in the void mother beast's brain exploded and destroyed Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's spiritual sense in an instant. In the next moment, this spiritual sense gushed out from the void mother beast's brain and shot back at Celestial Emperor Lang Xian. Divine Emperor Lang Xian's expression changed drastically. The strength of the surging divine sense even surpassed his own. He immediately understood who the master of the Void Mother was. This Void Mother is already under the control of Supreme Emperor. The last time I met the Void Mother, its master was still the Mount of Celestial Master Mu, but now it has become Supreme Emperor. His reaction speed could not be described as slow. Immediately, his divine sense formed a defensive formation. At the same time, heavenly palaces leaped out behind him and connected to form a heavenly court. He mobilized his mana and at this moment, his mana turned into defensive runes. The runes formed Tao patterns and wrapped around his body. Innate One Qi. He inherited the bloodline of Heavenly Monarch Absolute Beginning. The Innate One Qi unified all the great Taoists in his heavenly palaces and formed a whole, greatly increasing his defensive power. In terms of bloodline, he was the best bloodline in the world. He had the Creator God Kings and Heavenly Monarch Absolute Beginnings bloodlines at the same time. He took care of both the Divine Sense Tao and the Innate One Qi and the Absolute Beginning Tao at the same time. Compared to Heavenly Venerate Hao, he was even more perfect. However, the Divine Sense Tao and the Connate One Qi were not unified in his body. If he could unify them and form a complete primordial Tao, he would surpass Heavenly Venerate Hao and become the leader of the 10 Heavenly Venerates. However, Heavenly Venerate Hao was in fact the leader of the 10 Heavenly Venerates. He was the rightful ruler of the Heaven Court and enjoyed more resources. Meanwhile, Divine Emperor Lang Xian was only one of the 10 Heavenly Venerates. He did not show off his power. Even so, there was not much difference between the 10 Heavenly Venerates. He unleashed his full power at this moment. The number of heavenly palaces behind him continued to increase, from 18 to 34, forming a great heavenly court. However, before his aura reached its peak, Emperor Tai's fist had already landed on his face. Monarch Tai's attacks were simple and brutal. In the primordial era, he was the strongest monarch, and there was no need for any fancy divine sense skills. His fist was the strongest weapon. Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's face twisted and exploded. His head flew backward and his body was like a piece of paper that was folded into a right angle. Monarch Tai, who had obtained the primordial stone, was unbelievably strong. Even a terrifying existence like Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's body could not withstand a single blow from him. Just as Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's body bent, the great heavenly court's Abhijna burst out. The innate I Qi, along with the terrifying divine sense, slammed into Monarch Tai's body. It was his Yuan Shun Qi mantra. His entire life's comprehension was all in the Yuan Shun Qi mantra. To all the demigods he was indeed the Yuan Shan, the first demigod, the most ancient Yuan Shan. The Immortal Soul One Qi mantra had unified 34 monarch-level techniques. It was extremely powerful, tough, and ferocious. He knew very well that the Supreme Emperor had the upper hand. No matter how hard he tried to defend, he would fall into a passive position. He would lose his advantage and eventually die. The best way was to attack him and save him. The Supreme Emperor would fall into a passive position and turn the situation around. The Supreme Emperor's huge body covered half of the sky, and a mocking smile appeared on his face. The primordial stone embedded in his forehead shone brightly, and he allowed the attack to land on his body. His physical body was stronger than when he fought with Heavenly Venerate Clear. Under the attack of the Supreme Emperor, his body only swayed for a moment. In the next moment, his palm landed on the neck of the Supreme Emperor. Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's neck cracked open, and his head was almost chopped off. At the same time, Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's Yuan Shan rose up from the Great Heavenly Court. He stood guard in the Great Heavenly Court and pointed with his finger. The finger flew out like a stream of light and gathered all the innate Tao contained in the 34 heavenly palaces. The light emitted from the tip of the finger was tens of thousands of times brighter than the sun. This finger came out of nowhere and even Monarch Tai was caught off guard. Ding! The finger hit Monarch Tai's forehead and it was the absolute beginning raw stone. Monarch Tai's mind went blank and the raw stone was cracked open by his strike. There was nothing wrong with Monarch Tai's forehead, but there was a huge hole on the back of his head. The bright light shone with a blood-red light and illuminated the sky. You have fused Celestial King Gong Fu's Tao with Absolute Beginnings Tao? As expected of their son. Supreme Emperor condensed the shattered raw stone. The raw stone was reassembled and restored to its original state. It was still embedded in the center of his brows, he praised. If Gong Fu's son and I were still alive, he would definitely not be inferior to you. You only know this move, right, Lang Xian? That's why you can die. In the sea of chaos, Tai was calm. He explained to the puzzled crowd. Gong Fu is the wife of the Supreme Emperor. The Supreme Emperor killed Gong Fu's clansmen. In order to take revenge on him, Gong Fu fell in love with the Heavenly Emperor, Tai Chu, and gave birth to Divine Emperor Lang Xian. Everyone was stunned. Tai said unhurriedly. At that time Tai Chu was not the Heavenly Emperor. In name, he was the Supreme Emperor's foster son. The affair between the adopted son and the godmother was also a sensational event in the primordial age. Therefore, Tai Chu later killed Gong Fu to prevent his dark past from being known by others. Lan Yuqian did not have much of an impression of these secular morals, and did not feel that there was anything wrong with them. Su Shanghua, on the other hand, had the same expression all year round and did not reveal any strange expressions. The other followers were in an uproar. The reason why the Supreme Emperor wanted to get rid of Divine Emperor Lang Xian was because Gong Fu fell and killed her and the Supreme Emperor's son, but left behind her and Tai Chu's son Lang Xian. Tai said. It's precisely because of this reason that the Supreme Emperor has always been unhappy with Lang Xian. He felt that if his and Gong Fu's son died, then Tai Chu and Gong Fu's son must die as well. Su Shanghua said. The Supreme Ancient is truly chaotic. Tai smiled and said, it's always been so chaotic. Look at Lang Xian being passively beaten, but in the next moment the one being beaten is the Supreme Emperor. Everyone looked up at the sky. This was the chaotic sea. With the protection of the chaotic sea and Tai's crutches, no matter how fierce the battle above was, it did not affect them at all. It was just as the Tai Di said. Celestial Emperor Lang Xian did not completely merge the divine sense Tao and the innate One Qi. He only managed to comprehend that one move. His Yuan Shan kept repeating the same move. It was called the Divine Yuan One Finger. Divine Origin Finger was the first absolute beginning divine art. Not to mention Heavenly Venerate Vast Heaven, even Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning didn't know it. It was a pity that Supreme Emperor was on guard, so it was difficult for his move to be effective. Divine Emperor Lang Xian fell into a passive position. His neck had almost been chopped off by Supreme Emperor, and his injuries were getting more and more serious. Fortunately, he had a great divine art like Divine Origin Finger, which had the ability to threaten Supreme Emperor. Otherwise, he would have been defeated even faster and more miserably. In the depths of the void, Qin Mu executed his great divine art, Higan Divine Boat. He flew across the void and shuttled through the 29th layer of the void, making the pressure of the void helpless against him. However, if he dispersed this great divine art, he wouldn't be able to stay in the 29th layer of the void anymore. If the pressure was too great, it would endanger his body. His divine art was like Higan divine boat. He stood at the bow of the divine boat and watched the battle between Supreme Emperor and Lang Xian. He said in surprise, "Divine Emperor Lang Xian is really something. This move of his must be the skill that was created from the finger that godly monarch Gong Xian used to dig out monarch Tai's vertical eye from his glabella. Combined with the innate Wen Qi, it's really something." The 10 heavenly venerates each had their own skills, and they all had something that made people's eyes light up. In the front, there was Heavenly Venerate How suppressing Monarch Tai, and the great Tao of the returning ruins changed from the innate Wen Qi to 0. It was unbelievable. Behind him, there was Divine Emperor Lang Xian's divine origin finger, which displayed the power of great Tao of Absolute beginning for the first time. It was also overflowing with talent. He watched with relish. When Lang Xian was about to die under Supreme Emperor's attack, the sky suddenly became incomparably bright. The treasures of 49 heavenly Tao came crashing down, and all kinds of treasures burst forth with the might of heavenly Tao. They struck Supreme Emperor until his body swayed and his footsteps became disordered. "Ancestral God King, make your move." Qin Mu clenched his fists in excitement, but at that moment, the divine boat under his feet turned invisible and disappeared. Qin Mu's extreme joy gave birth to sorrow, and he was instantly crushed and turned invisible by the 29th void. His body sank and he fell into the 28th void. His divine art burst forth, and he raised his sail to escape into the 29th void. With the power of his divine art, he could allow himself to pass through the 30th void, but if the divine art dispersed, the 30th void would be too dangerous for him, so it would be safer for him to stay in the 29th void. The aftershocks from the divine powers of Emperor Tai and Divine Emperor Lang Xian were extremely weak and did not pose much of a threat to him. However, if he fell into the 28th void, the threat to him would greatly increase. Although the Ancestor God King's 49 heavenly Tao treasure had beaten Emperor Tai until he was swaying, it did not threaten Emperor Tai's life. However, at the next moment, the 49 heavenly Tao treasure beads combined and merged into a supreme treasure. It was a strange treasure that used the heavenly pillar as a pole. The heavenly well, Tianxian, Tiangang, Tianyuan, Tianpan, Tianwei, and many other treasures were attached to the heavenly pillar. It made the weapon have some parts that were thick, some parts that were thin, and some parts that were like blades, some parts were like spears. A large hand grabbed at the center of the heavenly pillar. The Ancestor God King's scarlet cape fluttered as he brandished the supreme treasure. His body suddenly spun as his weapon transformed. With the heavenly blade as the leader, he slashed at Monarch Tai's waist with a clang. The Supreme Emperor grunted as he staggered backward, blood oozing out of his waist. The treasure, which had gathered 49 heavenly Tao treasures, was so terrifying that it threatened his strength. The Ancestor God King brandished the heavenly Tao treasure and turned the blade. The hilt of the blade smashed at the Supreme Emperor. At the hilt, the heavenly bell fluttered. With a loud clang, the heavenly bell reverberated as it struck the Supreme Emperor's psyche, causing it to scatter. The Ancestor God King took a step forward, and the heaven bell retreated to the second line. With the heaven pillar as a weapon and the heaven pillar as a building, he used the heaven pillar as a hammer and smashed it into Supreme Emperor's head. On the other side, God Emperor Lang Xian came back to his senses and reconnected his neck. He then used his divine vitality to point at the heart of Supreme Emperor's brows. When the two celestial venerables joined hands, the situation was instantly reversed. Supreme Emperor retreated repeatedly to block the attacks of the two celestial venerables, but the attacks were less and the defense was more. His body was also injured repeatedly. Qin Mu clenched his fists in excitement and stared at the heart of Supreme Emperor's brows. The primordial stone was there, and it wouldn't be long before it was crushed. At that time he would be able to retrieve the primordial stone. Suddenly, his gaze inadvertently caught sight of the Void Mother in the distance, and he couldn't help being stunned. He saw the Void Mother hiding in the 17th void, and countless void beasts surged into the 17th void like a tide. Supreme Emperor actually still has the strength to control these void beasts? What is he planning to do? Just as he thought of this, he suddenly saw the eyes of the Void Mother open up, revealing its huge mouth. The huge void beasts lined up neatly and walked into the mouth of the Void Mother. The countless sharp teeth in the mouth of the Void Mother rotated automatically, slicing and swallowing the void beasts that walked into its mouth. Qin Mu was stunned. He saw the body of the Void Mother expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. It grew bigger and bigger, and the space markings on its body became clearer and clearer. This Void Mother was originally just an ordinary void beast. After the dragon Qilin had subdued it, the Void Mother had only grown 3 to 5 times in the past few years. But now, in a short moment, the Void Mother had grown rapidly, and its aura was getting stronger and stronger. Supreme Emperor plans to use the characteristics of the Void Mother to create another adult Void Mother. No, he plans to create another king of divine beasts as strong as Long Xiao. Cold sweat broke out on Qin Mu's forehead. He plans to use the Void Mother to sneak attack Lang Xian, Ancestral God King, and the rest. The devouring speed of the Void Mother became faster and faster, and its physique became stronger and stronger. Gradually, even the 17th Void couldn't withstand its huge physique. The Void Mother's body extended to the 18th Void, but its head was in the 17th Void, allowing more void beasts to walk into its mouth continuously to strengthen itself. Soon tens of thousands of void behemoths fell into its mouth and turned into energy. The Void Mother seemed to think that the void beasts taking the initiative to feed was too slow, so it opened its mouth wide and bit down. Thousands of void beasts and a large chunk of the 17th Void were bitten off by him. The other void beasts were terrified, but they didn't dare to move. They prostrated themselves and let out whimpering sounds. The Void Mother opened her mouth and devoured the void beasts in the 17th Void very quickly. The Void Mother's physique was even larger, and her body had already arrived at the 23rd Void. This huge beast was too strong, giving Qin Mu, who was in the 29th Void, an extremely oppressive feeling. This feeling was similar to when he was facing Long Xiao. Even if this female beast wasn't as strong as Long Xiao, it wasn't far off. Suddenly, the female beast stood up and shook her body. Her physique became smaller and smaller, and when she transformed into a huge beast of 100 miles, she leaped out of the void. Last month, God Mu remembered that his contribution fees were only 2/3 of the company's, and the external contribution fees were also half of the original contribution fees. Brothers, was this the fragrance of flowers blooming inside a wall? Tearful subscription. The Void Mother has condensed its body to such a small size, so it's much stronger than the Void Mother I met when I first entered the ancestral court. Qin Mu looked at the Void Mother that had leaped out of the void, and his heart trembled slightly. Supreme Emperor had probably made a move this time to end the lives of 1 or 2 celestial venerables, and clear the obstacles for him to rule the world again in the future. To the current 10 celestial venerables, the ancient gods were still their greatest enemy, but to Supreme Emperor the ancient gods were nothing to worry about. The 10 celestial venerables were their greatest enemy. As the ruler of the immemorial era, he had many methods to deal with the Heavenly Duke, Earth Count, and other ancient gods, but he didn't have such confidence in dealing with the 10 celestial venerables. The current strength and influence of the 10 celestial venerables were far above the ancient gods. The reason why they didn't make a move was that if they forcefully eliminated the ancient gods, they would also suffer great casualties. The 10th Heavenly Venerate did not seem to agree with each other. No one wanted to be the one to suffer casualties. Whoosh! The moment the Void Mother leaped out of the void, its figure disappeared, like a transparent glass flying through the sky. Its body passed through the divine abilities of the 3 Heavenly Venerate existences, and came directly to the back of the Ancestor God King. The Ancestor God King was hacking at Emperor Tai with all his strength when he suddenly became alert. The cloak behind his back fluttered, and with a whistle, it turned into a world of Xuandu. When the Void Mother Beast passed through the world of Xuandu, he immediately sensed its exact location. His world of Xuandu was refined by the Heavenly Tao. It was mixed with other great Taos in similar domains. Even the Heavenly Duke could not help but praise his unfilial son for being powerful. When he sensed the Void Mother Beast, his primordial spirit immediately exploded. A heavenly court suddenly leaped out and his primordial spirit stood in the heavenly court's Lingxiao treasured palace. With a backhand seal he struck down. At that moment, Supreme Emperor suddenly laughed out loud. He swept away his previous weakness and took on Celestial Emperor Lang Xian's strike head-on. Then, he arrived in front of the Ancestor God King. The heavenly Tao treasure in the Ancestor God King's hand turned into a heavenly lance as it smashed down. Supreme Emperor did not dodge or dodge. He used his head to take the strike head-on as he sent his divine sense into the Ancestor God King's heavenly court. The Ancestor God King suffered a pincer attack. His body suddenly turned into a stream of light as he was sucked into the heavenly court by his Yuan Shun. His body fused with his Yuan Shun as one. At the same time, his heavenly Tao treasure flew back and split apart, turning into 49 heavenly Tao treasures to defend the heaven court. At the same time, he took on the Void Mother and Supreme Emperor's attacks head-on. Boom! The divine sense Great All Heaven descended from the sky and collided with the 49 heavenly Tao treasures. This was an attack that contained Supreme Emperor's divine sense Tao fruit. Even heavenly venerate vast heaven's primordial spirit would be trapped by this attack. The 49 heavenly Tao treasures were smashed into pieces. There were shattered pieces of the heavenly Tao treasures everywhere. The Ancestor God King's eyes, ears, mouth, nose, and mouth spewed blood at the same time. He looked astonished. His body and primordial spirit trembled at the same time, and his divine body nearly split apart. The Supreme Emperor's attack with the Tao fruit was extremely powerful. He was severely injured in an instant. Tao realm. Is this the ultimate Tao realm that the founding emperor spoke of? He had looked down on the Tao realm that the founding emperor had created in the past. He thought that the founding emperor's path had gone astray and was narrow. However, Emperor Tai's attack with the Tao fruit allowed him to see how powerful and terrifying the Tao realm system was. The system of the Divine Treasure's heavenly palace was improving step by step. Every improvement had a trace to follow. The increase in cultivation strength brought by an increase in cultivation realm could be predicted and followed. However, the terrifying part of the Tao realm was that it was difficult to enter the Tao in the early stages. Moreover, one's cultivation strength was not necessarily higher than the system of the heavenly palace. The time spent was also long. However, in the later stages, the benefits brought by every improvement were extremely great. When one reached the peak of the Tao realm, one would be as terrifying as the Supreme Emperor when one cultivated Tao fruits. Moreover, the current Supreme Emperor was not a complete Supreme Emperor. The current Supreme Emperor had a physical body and divine sense, but no primordial spirit. Even so, he was already powerful enough to crush him. Although the Ancestor God King realized how terrifying the Tao realm was, the Supreme Emperor's Tao realm was still different from the founding Emperor's Tao realm. The Supreme Emperor's cultivation was fake, and he had relied on the sacrifice of the Creator and his ancestors to cultivate to this stage. As for the founding Emperor's Tao realm, he had to improve himself step by step, improving his comprehension of the Tao, creating his own Tao, and eventually refining a Sword Tao fruit. It could be said that Supreme Emperor had crippled himself. However, the Ancestor God King was also powerful. He immediately stabilized the array formation. As long as he could withstand this strike, Divine Emperor Langxian would be able to hold Supreme Emperor back. At that time, it was unknown who would emerge victorious. At that moment, the Mother Beast pounced and passed through the Ancestor God King's body. The behemoth immediately transformed from an illusion into a reality. Its massive body constantly swelled the Ancestor God King. The Ancestor God King became taller and fatter like he was inflating air. Soon he turned into a giant god that was thousands of miles tall. He was still expanding and looked extremely terrifying. The Mother Beast crazily devoured his blood and qi in his body. She planned to refine his blood and qi, and completely devour this heavenly venerate. Ha 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 ha. The Ancestor God King's face was distorted, but he laughed crazily. The Heavenly Duke cannot do everything, but as his son, the Duran body that inherited the Heavenly Duke's bloodline, he can do everything. I don't have the restrictions of his rules. His body suddenly changed. Just a moment ago, he was still the holy and solemn God King, but now, he seemed to have turned into a devil king who did all kinds of evil in Yudu. His body seemed to have turned into the world of Yudu. It was gloomy, terrifying, and the strange and unpredictable power of Yudu burst out. One after another, the great Tao was like soul-luring chains, locking up the void Mother Beast. The chains passed through the body of the Void Mother Beast and hooked its soul. The Ancestor God King was actually planning to refine the Void Mother Beast instead. Oh no! Emperor Tai was shocked. I might have kicked a hard rock. The true abilities of the 10th Heavenly Venerate were all hidden very deeply. However, if he used all his strength to refine the Void Mother Beast, he would not be able to block my divine sense, great overarching heaven. This attack was enough to take his life. He did not want to expose his identity as concubine Chang Tian. He once again used his divine sense, great overarching heaven, in preparation to send the Ancestor God King on his way. However, Emperor Lang Xian came from behind him. His divine essence and finger pierced through the back of his head and shot out from his forehead. Ding! A crisp sound rang out. The primordial stone in the great emperor's glabella exploded and flew in all directions.
The fine Emperor Lang Xuan was overjoyed.
He could not care less about rescuing the Ancestor God King, who was about to fall into the soul consciousness Great Luo Heaven. He quickly flew over and grabbed at the fragments of the primordial stone. The great emperor's soul consciousness Great Luo Heaven was also greatly weakened by the explosion of the primordial stone. The Ancestor God King's head had already fallen into the soul consciousness Great Luo Heaven. His head began to crack, and his skin flew up and shattered like pieces of paper. His face was soon badly mutilated, revealing ghastly white bones. The power of divine consciousness Great Overarching Heaven was simply too tyrannical. Even if Supreme Emperor couldn't use his full strength, the corporeal body of Heavenly Venerate wouldn't be able to withstand it. Qin Mu, who was high up in the 29th void on the ground, immediately roused his vital qi and executed Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. He sprinted down from the void and unleashed his divine arts. Stepping on the divine boat, he transformed into numerous shadows that swept through the layers of void. He planned to snatch the flying primordial stones. At the same time, in the Sea of Chaos, Supreme Yi said calmly, "Fellow Taoists, look, there will be a change soon." Lan Yutian and Su Shanghua were already beaming with joy. When they heard that there would be a change, they couldn't help asking in bewilderment, "Dao brother, what other changes can there be?" The old Supreme Yi didn't say anything. Divine Emperor Langxian shook his sleeves and was about to put all the primordial stones into his sleeves when purple light suddenly burst forth and purple clouds descended. It was as if the heaven had suddenly collapsed. Celestial Master Yun. Celestial Emperor Langxian was shocked and called out in a hoarse voice. He had been hit. He pounced forward and pieces of absolute beginning stones flew past him. He turned around in the air, but what he saw was not Celestial Master Yun. Instead, Celestial Master Shao reached out his hand with a smile on his face and grabbed at the scattered pieces of the absolute beginning stones. Celestial Master Shao had just grabbed all the pieces of the original stones in his hand, when his expression changed drastically in the next moment. His hand that was holding the original stone suddenly broke at the wrist and his hand fell from the sky. The thing that cut off his hand was a hairpin. The hairpin was extremely sharp and contained the power of the great Tao of the ultimate. In the distance, concubine Yin Tian put away the hairpin and inserted it into her hair bun. She raised her hand and shook it. The square cauldron that had suppressed the Taisher mineral vein soared into the sky and surrounded Celestial Master Shao with a swoosh. A lotus flower suddenly appeared under Celestial Master Zhao's feet. He stomped heavily and the lotus flower fell into the square cauldron. The lotus flower and the cauldron fell together. Below them was Chaos Ocean. Below the lotus flower and the cauldron was Heavenly Venerate Zhao's right hand, which was still holding onto the primordial stone. The land around Chaos Ocean suddenly churned, and incomparably thick roots shot into the sky. They were like thousands of tentacles, and they intertwined with each other as they wrapped around Heavenly Venerate Zhao's right hand. This series of changes made everyone who was hiding in Chaos Ocean flabbergasted. Their mouths were agape, and they couldn't say a word. At the same time, Qin Mu was still on the boat when Heavenly Venerate Mu stood at the bow of the boat with a gloomy expression. "I woke up so early and rushed to the evening market. Bad luck." In the Sea of Chaos, Tai had a kind look on his face. He smiled at Su Shenghua and Lan Yutian, who were stunned, and said, "Interesting, right? However, there are still some fellow Taoists who haven't made a move yet." Everyone was already somewhat numb from the shock. They raised their heads and looked up. From their point of view, the tentacles above the Sea of Chaos were incomparably thick and dark. The bark on the surface was like dragon scales. It reflected the unpredictable situation of the Sea of Chaos. Earth Mother, how dare you take my things? Although Celestial Master Zhao's palm was broken, he snorted angrily from inside. He punched down with his fist, and the countless roots of Earth Mother turned into an altar. On the altar, Earth Mother's real body slowly rose up and took this attack head-on. The terrifying fluctuations in the sky above the Sea of Chaos surged in all directions. However, when it blew into the Sea of Chaos and met Tai Yi's walking stick, it immediately became calm and undisturbed. In the sky, the countless roots of Earth Mother Yuanjun broke off and fluttered in the air. They fell from the sky and smashed into the Chaos Sea. Not long after, they were assimilated by the Chaos Sea and turned into wisps of Chaos Qi in the sea. Su Shenghua's gaze fell on Tai Yi's walking stick and revealed a surprised expression. This walking stick seems to be much more powerful than origin wood. What kind of wood is it made of? Tai Yi noticed his gaze and said with a smile, "There are many pieces of wood in Heavenly Venerate Mu's house, but they have all been burnt by me. Don't tell him that I have another one here, or else he will plot to take mine again." Su Shenghua was at a loss. There are many pieces of wood in Cult Master Qin's house? When did he become so rich and overbearing? This fellow clearly looked like he was penniless and wanted to snatch good things from everyone he saw. At this moment, he's probably plotting to snatch the wealth of others. Old Tai Yi smiled. Look quickly, there's a fellow Taoist about to stir up trouble again. However, the culprit is still on the way. At this moment, Qin Mu was still rushing over on his boat. He was moving as fast as lightning and was secretly complaining that he had hidden too high and shouldn't have hidden in the 29th void. Heavenly Venerate Dawn's right fist caused Earth Mother's body to sink down. Just as she was about to fall into the Sea of Chaos, the sacrificial altar suddenly shattered into pieces. Countless roots shrank and tunneled into the ground before disappearing. Earth Mother Primordial Lord had suffered a huge loss because she only had one soul left and her cultivation had been whittled away by Qin Mu. So she had no choice but to avoid the sharp edge. In the sky above Heavenly Venerate Dawn's broken right hand, the battle between the lotus and the square cauldron was still ongoing. The two treasures of Heavenly Venerate burst forth with incomparably terrifying power as they tried to suppress each other. They took away Celestial Master Zhao's right hand and the primordial stone in his hand. Suddenly, a beam of rainbow light came from the sky. The light was like a pillar, pouring in from the hole in the seal of the ancestral court. It turned into a huge palm print, covering the lotus flower and the square cauldron with a loud bang. Pressing down on the two treasures at an even faster speed, they fell into the chaotic sea. Heavenly Duke! The Celestial Masters and Imperial Emperor, who were fighting in the sky, were shocked. They all tried to stop the Heavenly Duke's attack from Xiandu at this moment. Yudu's demonic qi suddenly gushed out and drowned the chaotic sea in an instant. In the demonic qi, a earth count slowly rose up. The vertical eye between his brows opened and stopped the falling Heavenly Master Zhao's right hand. He swung his whip with a swoosh. He wrapped this Heavenly Master's right hand and pulled it toward the ocean formed by Yudu's demonic qi. Heavenly Duke Earth Count, are you also unable to endure the loneliness and are you determined to interfere in the affairs of the world? Celestial Emperor Shao repelled concubine Yen Tian and descended from the sky. He sneered and said, "However, the seal is still there. You are unable to descend with your true bodies and are no match for me. If your true bodies descend, you will be bound by the great Tao and that will be the time of your death. Why don't you retreat quickly?" He came with anger and even used a hidden method to force concubine Yen Tian to retreat. It was clear how powerful he was. However, when he was on his way to kill the Earth Count, Celestial Emperor Shao suddenly charged at him from the side. Celestial Emperor Shao felt a chill in his heart, and the two of them collided in the air. They separated. Emperor Tai sneered and abandoned him as he rushed to the Earth Count below. The Banshee is not bad. Celestial Master Shao sneered and also rushed to the Earth Count. Your wife I sleep. Emperor Tai was furious. He chased after the Earth Count and fought with him. As the Earth Count was not in his real body, he struggled to put away the underworld river whip and tried to return to Hades. Boom! The ocean formed by the demonic qi of Yudu shook violently. The Supreme Emperor and Celestial Master Shao descended and blew up the demonic Qi ocean. The two Celestial Master-level experts' imposing manner shook the demonic Qi ocean and split it apart, revealing the chaotic sea below. Below the chaotic sea, Su Shanghua, Lan Yutian, and the others looked up. They could only see the sturdy legs of these gods and demons, which were like pillars supporting the sky. They stepped on the surface of the Sea of Chaos, but their pressure didn't fall on the Sea of Chaos, but on Tai Yi's walking stick. Su Shanghua looked at the walking stick and saw that it was slightly bent under the pressure. Taoist brother, are you saying that this walking stick came from Celestial Master Mu's family? Su Shanghua asked. Celestial Master Mu's family has a lot of this kind of wood? The old man Tai Yi said with a smile. It's all over the mountains and plains. If fellow Taoist Su wants it, ask Heavenly Venerate Mu for a few mountains. Heavenly Venerate Mu is very generous and will definitely not refuse. Su Shanghua was greatly moved. Lan Yutian was also moved. He said, I want a few mountains too. Heavenly Venerate Mu will definitely give them to you. Don't worry, don't worry. The old man Tai Yi said with a kind smile. Boom! 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 Another few violent tremors rang out as the Earth Count's demonic Qi Sea completely exploded. Concubine Yan, Ancestor God King, Divine Emperor Lang Xian, and the others had arrived. The Celestial Master's divine light swept out, causing the demonic Qi Sea to completely evaporate and cease to exist. The Lava Earth Count stood in the middle of the Celestial Masters with the Underworld River Whip in his hand. On the other end of the whip was Celestial Master Zhao's right hand. Even though the Earth Count had always been calm, had always been scheming, and had always been powerful, he was completely at a loss at this moment. He stood there looking rather awkward. It was impossible for him to escape into Yudu. The place where he stood was Yudu. However, now that the demonic Qi of Yudu had been dissolved, the Sea of Chaos was under his feet. It could be said that he was completely blocked and had nowhere to go. This Lava Earthen Count was only his avatar. He did not have the terrifying combat strength of his main body. He could only be killed with a single strike when facing the tigers and wolves around him. Suddenly, the Sea of Chaos stirred again. It was the Void Mother that had descended. It was leaning closely behind Supreme Emperor as it stared vigilantly at the Ancestor God King and the Earthen Count. It had nearly been refined to death by the Ancestor God King. Fortunately, the Ancestor God King had fought head-on with Supreme Emperor, allowing it to escape from the Ancestor God King's body. However, its strength had been greatly reduced as a result. Under the Chaos Sea, everyone was uneasy. Now, 5 Celestial Master-level existences had gathered on the surface of the sea, and the Void Mother could barely be considered half of them. There was also the Earth Mother Primordial Lord hiding in the dark, glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey. The Heavenly Duke was also watching closely, and he could attack at any time. Furthermore, there was a Lava Earth Count in the middle. Although it was surrounded by all the terrifying existences, its cultivation base and strength were also extraordinary. With so many powerful existences gathered here, could Tai Yi's walking stick made of dead wood really hold on? Whoosh! Suddenly, a bright light flashed in the sky, and Qin Mu finally rushed out of the void and appeared above Chaos Sea. He took a glance down and turned around to leave. Instigator! Supreme Emperor raised his head to look at him and gave a cold snort. All the heavenly venerates present had no way to back down, so in the face of this situation, they had no idea what to do. If they really started a war, many heavenly venerates would die. Suddenly, Qin Mu turned back and shouted, Brother Earth Count, what are you waiting for? Throw away the primordial stones. Throw them into the sea. Earth Count came to a realization and released Underworld River Whip. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's right hand fell into the Sea of Chaos along with the primordial stones in his hand. On the surface of the sea, everyone's faces trembled, but no one acted rashly. They could only watch as the primordial stones fell into the Sea and the Sea of Chaos. Su Shanghua and Lan Yuqian watched as Heavenly Venerate Zhao's hand, which was holding the primordial stone, fell down and landed in front of them. In that hand, the gem light of the primordial stone emitted from the gaps between his fingers. Neither of them moved. Instead, they looked at old Tai Yi. Old Tai Yi smiled and said, This primordial stone is the primordial stone. It contains the Tao of the primordial. Even Heavenly Emperor Tai Chu himself was unable to comprehend the true primordial. He suddenly stopped at this point and did not continue speaking. The two of them were still staring at him, waiting for him to continue speaking. Although Heavenly Venerate Zhao's right hand was broken, 2 fingers quietly extended out at this moment. The other 3 fingers were still tightly clutching the raw stone fragment. The 2 fingers were like legs, allowing the right hand to stand up. They walked out along the seabed of the primal chaos sea. Clatter! A piece of the original stone fell, and the 2 fingers hurriedly stopped. The fingers searched around, and finally found the original stone. They carefully picked up the original stone and kept it in their palms. They continued to walk out with 2 fingers. Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian could not endure it any longer. They could not help but shift their gazes to the Heavenly Venerate's right hand, and then turned their heads to look at old Tai Yi. Lan Yutian's 3,000 followers and a group of immemorial behemoths stared at the Celestial Master's right hand curiously. They watched as the Celestial Master kept walking out and dropping gemstones from his palm. The behemoths were kind-hearted. They moved their butts and let the Celestial Master walk past them. They did not stop him. The Celestial Master's right hand finally reached the space supported by the crutch. Just as he took a step, the chaotic air pressure came down. With a bang, the Celestial Master's right hand was pressed to the ground. The absolute beginning original stone fragments in his palm scattered all over the ground. Heavenly Venerate Zhao's right hand struggled for a moment, but how terrifying was the weight of the chaotic sea. His right hand clashed head-on with the Earth Mother Yuan Jun. He forced the Earth Mother back and was whipped by the Earth Count. The magic power in his right hand was exhausted, and he could not fight against the chaotic sea at all. Now that he was pressed down, he could not escape. The old man could see that Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian were still staring at him. He sighed helplessly. You are Tao seekers. Why do you have to know the disadvantages of attaining Tao? If you have good or bad intentions, you will not be pure when you attain Tao. Lan Yutian thought for a moment and said shyly, Elder is right. I have been taught bad by my brother. He always makes me be more careful. Su Shanghua probed. Then Taoist brother, if we take this primordial stone and comprehend the great Tao inside, will it do us any harm? Lan Yutian was stunned and quickly looked at Tai Yi. Tai Yi was helpless. He could only say, there are disadvantages. First, the Supreme Emperor wants to kill you. This primordial stone is his item for attaining Tao. Without it, his cultivation strength will never reach its peak. Secondly, Heavenly Emperor of Primordial Beginning wants to kill all of you. This origin stone is also his item for attaining Tao. Even though he has attained Tao, he hasn't attained Tao yet. He has to collect all the origin stones and all the divine stones. Therefore, apart from getting rid of all the people who have obtained the origin stones, he also has to get rid of all the creators. Cultmaster, Big Brother, still has foresight. Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian thought at the same time. If Qin Mu hadn't kept telling them to be more cautious, they would probably have taken the original stone in their hands happily and offended Supreme Emperor and Heavenly Emperor for no reason. Great Change asked, in that case, fellow Taoists, do you want to take the original stone or not? Lan Yutian looked at Su Shanghua. He knew that Su Shanghua was his big brother's fellow Taoist and always had ideas. Sometimes, when Qin Mu couldn't make up his mind, he would specially go to West Earth to ask him for advice. Su Shanghua pondered for a moment. We take the raw stone only to take its path and comprehend the path of absolute beginning through the raw stone. We don't take its energy or borrow its power. With that, no matter if it's Supreme Emperor or Heavenly Emperor absolute beginning in the future, as long as they want the raw stone back, we will return it to them. Lan Yutian thought about it and praised. My brother said that it's better to teach a man to fish than to teach a man to fish. When he taught me cultivation, he only taught me the principles of cultivation and didn't teach me the specific divine arts, paths, and skills. This is the reason. The old man Tai Yi sighed. Celestial Master Mu is right. However, you have to observe his words as well as his actions. Although Celestial Master Mu's words are good, he didn't only learn how to fish, but he also wanted to snatch other people's fish. You can't learn from him. The two agreed and went forward to the right hand of the Celestial Master, who was lying on the ground. They each picked up a few pieces of the original stone. The surface of the Sea of Chaos was still silent. Although the magma earthen count had thrown away the pieces of the original stone and the right hand of the heavenly venerate, he was still surrounded by the heavenly venerates. Everyone was still in a stalemate. The magma earthen count suddenly sighed and dispersed the mana of this avatar. Immediately, it turned into a pile of stones that were destroyed and refined by the sea of chaos, turning into wisps of chaotic chi. In the face of such a situation, his avatar was completely useless. If he continued to be trapped here, his wisdom would be laughed at, so he might as well give up this body. Everyone remained motionless. Celestial Master Shao, Celestial Master Yan, Ancestor God King, and Divine Emperor Lang Xian were silent. Cold sweat broke out on the Supreme Emperor's forehead. He suddenly realized that after the Earth Count gave up on this avatar, his situation had turned bad. Celestial Master Mu seems to have tricked me again. The corners of his eyes twitched. Suddenly, Celestial Master Shao said calmly, "We are Celestial Masters after all." "Yes, no matter what, we are Celestial Masters after all," said Concubine Yan. The Ancestral God King and Divine Emperor Langxian nodded and said, "We are Celestial Masters after all. Although we have grudges and feuds, we have to be united in the face of external enemies." Supreme Emperor suddenly laughed out loud. "Well said. We are Celestial Venerables after all. We should stick together and share a common enemy." The other 4 Celestial Venerables fell silent as if they had been stabbed in the heart. Supreme Emperor was too sinister. One sentence showed that he was among the 10 Celestial Venerables. It could not help but arouse the suspicion of everyone. Although Celestial Master Shao knew Supreme Emperor's true identity, Celestial Master Shao would not say that Supreme Emperor was the Heaven Consort. Because if Celestial Master Shao exposed his identity as Supreme Emperor, then Supreme Emperor would also expose his identity as Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning. Both sides would suffer. The balance of interests would allow them to maintain a tacit understanding, just like how Heavenly Consort Yen would not expose Celestial Master Shao and Heavenly Consort Shao would not expose her identity. The Ancestor God King said lightly, "Supreme Emperor must die. Supreme Emperor is absolutely not allowed to exist among the 10 Heavenly Venerates." "Dao brothers, what do you think?" "We agree," said Heavenly Venerate Dawn. Concubine Yen Tian and the Ancestor God King smiled. "We agree. We agree." The Supreme Emperor took a step back as his feet landed on the Void Mother Beast's back. He laughed and said, "You juniors want to take my life too? I have dominated the ancient times, but no one dares to go against me." The moment his feet moved, the 4 Heavenly Venerates, Dawn, Yen, Ancestor, and Lang, attacked at the same time, pincer attacking the Supreme Emperor. At the same time they attacked, the Void Mother Beast under Emperor Tai's feet leaped back into the void and flashed through the layers of void with Emperor Tai. In front of Emperor Tai, the bodies of the 4 Celestial Masters twisted the void. One by one, their powerful bodies broke through the layers of void, shattering and shattering like a mirror. The 4th Heavenly Venerates will formed a city, and the powerful void seemed to not exist in front of them. When the gods and demons entered the first void, they would be assimilated by the void. Even the Creator with a strong cultivation could not enter the multiple void. Only the Creator Elder with a certain cultivation level could entrust his divine sense into the depths of the multiple void after his death, and become an ancestral spirit. As for the gods and devils of other races, only when their divine consciousness entered the Tao and comprehended the existence of the space markings could they enter the multiverse. There were very few people like Qin Mu who could enter the 30th void. In the era when the Creator ruled the universe, there weren't many such existences. Qin Mu had relied on him to comprehend the Tao of innate One Qi and divine consciousness, and he had already come into contact with the Tao of absolute beginning, so it wasn't difficult for him to enter the void. However, the 4th Heavenly Venerate had relied on his powerful corporeal body. The strength of their corporeal bodies made void space not only unable to assimilate them, but it was even crushed to smithereens by their corporeal bodies. This was the terrifying aspect of Heavenly Venerate existences. However, Supreme Emperor knew that Heavenly Venerates also had their limits. This limit had long been groped out by Heavenly Venerate Yun, Heavenly Venerate Ling, and Heavenly Venerate Yu. The Void Bridge in the Great Void was the bridge built in the 35th level of void space. The bridge was built by the 3 Heavenly Venerates and the Great Void Creator together. Heavenly Venerate, you also built 3 rooms at the end of the bridge. The bridge was built extremely precipitously. If one wanted to cross it, one would have to withstand the crushing pressure of the 35th level of void space. Even if the Heavenly Venerate was not careful, he would be destroyed. The Heavenly Venerate Fire, Heavenly Venerate Void, and Founding Emperor were all trapped there. They were almost destroyed by the void. The 35 layers of void was the limit of a celestial master. As long as the Supreme Emperor brought the Void Mother into the 35th layer of void, he could make the 4 celestial masters retreat. The sound of thunder could be heard from the depths of the void. Along with the lightning in the depths of the void, standing in the ancestral court, one could even see a huge shadow being illuminated in the depths of the void. The bodies were incomparably huge, and when they moved, cracks appeared in the surrounding space, spreading out in all directions like a spiderweb. Their movement speed was also fast. When the shadows were illuminated and dimmed down, they were already far away when they were illuminated again. On this day, blood suddenly flowed out from the sky. The gurgling divine blood was like a huge waterfall that flowed down from the depths of the sky, forming a blood waterfall that hung in midair. Qin didn't walk too far. When he saw this blood waterfall, he noticed something smashing down from the sky. It was like a planet crashing into the earth, raising gusts of strong winds and meteors. Wherever that thing crashed, the earth shook and mountains shook and volcanoes spewed out. Even though the ancestral court was far stronger than the other places, it was still unable to withstand such a collision. When Qin arrived there, many flames burst forth from the sky, and huge fireballs left long trails of flames as they fell from the sky. Qin looked at the first huge pit and saw a huge fist inside. It was Supreme Emperor's fist, but he didn't know which Heavenly Venerate had chopped it down, causing the mountains to collapse and the earth to crack. Supreme Emperor's corporeal body is one of the most powerful corporeal bodies in the immemorial era after all. Only Heavenly Emperor's absolute beginning can be on par with him. This fist might be able to be kept and refined into a treasure. Just as he thought of this, countless roots flew out from the magma-like earth and dragged Supreme Emperor's fist away. Earth Mother! Qin immediately rushed forward and was about to snatch Supreme Emperor's hand when the sky suddenly brightened up and turned snow white. Another thigh fell from the sky, and it was even more astonishing when the fist landed on the ground. The violent winds and huge waves sent him flying. Supreme Emperor's thigh. Qin stopped moving and all sorts of items fell from the sky. Boom, 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 they smashed everything in a radius of 10,000 miles into the ground. The surface of the ground floated on the magma like a pot of red braised meat. The bubbles pushed up pieces of meat, making them gurgle. The surface of the ground trembled continuously. Supreme Emperor is really miserable. He was dismembered by the 4 celestial venerables. He couldn't help feeling pity in his heart. The strongest existence in the immemorial era had actually ended up like this when facing the 4 celestial venerables. He then became happy again and flew through the sea of fire to search for the body of Supreme Emperor. Suddenly, a huge body descended from the sky and crashed into the magma of the sea of fire, rolling and tumbling. Qin flew forward, and it was the Void Mother Beast. The head of the Void Mother Beast disappeared. It was unknown whether it had been killed by the Heavenly Venerate, but its corpse fell down from the sky. The Void Mother is dead? Doesn't that mean that the Void Beast is going extinct? He could not help but be stunned. The Void Mother had devoured all the Void Beasts in the ancestral court, and only then had it grown to its current state. The death of this Void Mother at the hands of the 4th Heavenly Venerate meant that the Void Mother in the ancestral court was extinct. There is still a Void Beast in Langxian. I wonder if that Void Beast is still alive? If that Void Beast is also dead, then the Void Beast will really be extinct. He sprinted towards the corpse of the Void Mother, and suddenly, a Void Beast egg rolled out from the body of the Void Mother and landed in the magma. Qin heart stirred slightly, and his magic power surged out to sweep up the Void Beast egg and put it into the heart of his brows. The last egg was born from the Void Mother, and the corpse sank into the magma and disappeared. Qin was about to fish up the corpse of the Void Mother when he suddenly stopped. His expression was solemn, and he saw the corpse of the Void Mother shriveling at a speed visible to the naked eye. Beast's blood was rapidly flowing out. The existence of the previous era has actually extended their sacrificial power to this place? He couldn't help feeling goosebumps all over his body. The huge corpse of the mother beast had turned into a huge skeleton in the magma in just a short moment. Not long after, the energy in the skeleton had also been exhausted and collapsed. His heart sank, and he immediately flew up to rush toward the bodies of the other Supreme Emperors. He came to the place where Supreme Emperor's arm had fallen, and there was only a broken bone left. Supreme Emperor's bones have also disappeared. There's no flesh or blood at all. Qin Mu's expression was solemn as he raised his head to look at the blood waterfall in the sky. It was the place where Supreme Emperor's divine blood had fallen. He executed his teleportation divine art, and in the next moment, he traversed 10,000 miles to appear at the place where the blood waterfall had fallen. His clothes fluttered in the wind, and the cloak on his back fluttered as he slowly landed on the ground. The place where the blood waterfall had fallen didn't form a blood lake or sea. Instead, the ground was extremely clean, without a single trace of blood. Looks like the ancestral court is indeed not suitable to be a battlefield. Qin Mu looked around. The entire ancestral court is the sacrificial altar of the existence of the previous era, he muttered. Any life that dies here will become an offering for them to come to this world and this era. Can the Great Black Mountain still be defended? He thought about it carefully for a moment. In the entire ancestral court, there were probably only 5 mineral veins that weren't sacrificial altars that existed in prehistoric times. Only the 5 mineral veins could still remain independent, and the other places were probably invaded by the power of the previous era. Speaking of which, after I came to the ancestral court, other than the 5 mineral veins, I didn't find any bones anywhere else. Whether it's the bones of the giant beast or the creator's bones, they have all disappeared. He let out a breath of turbid air. He originally thought that the creator's bones were devoured by the void beasts, but now that he thought about it, that was probably not the case. Regardless of whether it was humans or beasts, as long as they entered the ancestral court, they would become the sacrificial offerings for the existences of the previous era. The ancestral court was equivalent to a huge altar. In other words, the ancestral court was a huge dinner plate. The people who entered this place were all food on the plate, waiting for the prehistoric existences to enjoy it. Using the ancestral court as the sacrificial altar and all the living beings of the ancestral court as sacrifices, this skill is truly shocking. Who was the one who created it?
Qin Mu frowned deeply.
Who had such magic power and wisdom to turn the ancestral court into such a state? Based on the current situation of the ancestral court, it wasn't suitable for anyone to settle down here. It had to be sealed and no one could be allowed to come here. If there were people, there would be disputes. If there were a few more battles of heavenly venerate, even Tai wouldn't be able to stop those prehistoric existences from descending. The sky is collapsing but Tai is holding it up. I wonder if Supreme Emperor is alive or dead. It seems like his head hasn't fallen down yet. Qin Mu looked around, but he still didn't see Supreme Emperor's head falling down. Earth Mother Primordial Lord was still searching around, and tentacles kept dancing on the chaotic land. They were Earth Mother's roots. It seemed like Earth Mother only had time to find one fist of Supreme Emperor, and everything else had been sacrificed. Supreme Emperor is so pitiful. Qin Mu sighed in regret. It's a pity that it didn't land in my hands, while Fourth Heavenly Venerate is still chasing after Supreme Emperor's head. I'll go to the Sea of Chaos first and fish out the primordial stone. The Sea of Chaos was originally a mine of great change, and it was also a place that the sacrificial power of the previous universe couldn't reach. It was filled with chaos chi and it was extremely heavy. It could easily assimilate other things into the chi of chaos. When Heavenly Venerate Zhao's palm fell into the ocean, it wouldn't become a sacrificial offering. It would most likely not be assimilated by chaos chi for a while, and the primordial stones wouldn't be assimilated either. As long as one could go deep into Chaos Ocean, they would be able to find the fragments of the primordial stones. The last time I was able to walk out of that place alive, I had to rely on the Azure Heaven Stronghold. It's a pity that Taisu has already been born, and the Azure Heaven Stronghold is unable to do so. However, I have the 2 eggshells that Taoist brother Tai left for me. Qin Mu was full of confidence. With Tai's eggshells he would definitely be able to enter the Sea of Chaos and find the original stone fragments and Heavenly Venerate Zhao's hand. The original stone fragments were treasures, and Heavenly Venerate Zhao's hand was also an incredible treasure. He rushed toward the Sea of Chaos at lightning speed. Suddenly the earth churned and countless roots broke out from the ground. They were like earth-drilling dragons that drilled in and out of the earth, chasing after him crazily. It's Earth Mother Primordial Lord again. Qin Mu executed the great divine art of crossing the resurrection shore divine boat with a thought. He stepped on a divine boat and sailed far away into the void, leaving Earth Mother Primordial Lord far behind. Countless roots followed him into the void and passed through layers and layers of void like a group of devils dancing around. However, as Qin Mu went deeper, Earth Mother's roots gradually became more and more exhausted. Finally, Earth Mother couldn't catch up in time and could only retract her roots. Qin Mu escaped from the void and sneered. His body had already landed on the surface of the Sea of Chaos. At that moment, loud bangs sounded out, and Qin Mu's body stiffened. Abnormally tall figures appeared around him. He raised his head with great difficulty and saw Heavenly Consort Yen, then Heavenly Venerate Dawn, Ancestral God King, and Divine Emperor Lang Xian. The 4 celestial masters were in tatters. Their bodies were covered in wounds, their skin was torn, and their clothes were disheveled. The celestial masters' divine blood kept flowing out of their wounds and landing on the Chaos Sea. The 4 celestial masters were probably chasing after Supreme Emperor, and were injured by him. However, judging from the wounds on their bodies, apart from the wounds left by Supreme Emperor, there were also wounds caused by void destruction. The 4 heavenly venerates should have chased after Supreme Emperor all the way to the depths of the 35th layer of void, but they had been destroyed by the void to such an extent. Qin Mu stood in the middle of the 4 heavenly venerates and was obedient. He finally experienced the feeling of Lava Earth Count being surrounded by the heavenly venerates. Lava Earth Count was Earth Count's clone and could be abandoned at any time. It didn't have much of an effect on Earth Count's main body, but Qin Mu couldn't be as free and easy as Earth Count. He composed himself and was about to speak when Heavenly Venerate Xiao suddenly covered his broken arm and said with a pleasant expression, "I've lost an arm, so I'm afraid it'll be difficult to find primordial stone. I'll give this treasure to the 3 of you." He suddenly retreated and disappeared. God Emperor Lang Xian's face was sallow, and his aura faltered. He coughed up blood and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhao's injuries are only external, but mine are internal. Before you arrived, I was ambushed by the Supreme Emperor. My injuries were the most severe. I also have extravagant hopes of obtaining the absolute beginning primordial stone. Forget it. I'll leave it to you." His figure vanished into thin air. Concubine Yen Tian and the Ancestor God King frowned. These 2 powerful enemies had actually retreated at the first moment. They did not search for the absolute beginning primordial stone. Clearly they had other motives. Ancestor God King's body suddenly emitted explosive bangs as his expression changed drastically. He exclaimed, "My heavenly Tao treasure has been shattered. My cultivation level has been destroyed. Your Majesty, forgive me for not being able to escort you into the Chaos Sea. I have found the primordial stone and offered it to you. I have to return to my territory as soon as possible to recuperate." Consort Yin Tian's expression also changed as she retreated. She sighed. "My hidden illness has relapsed. I have very little cultivation level left. I have to return to the mineral vein to recuperate from my injuries." The Ancestor God King retreated as well and sneered. "In that case, I'll let this bastard Heavenly Venerate Mu have it easy. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you're satisfied." In the blink of an eye, the 4 heavenly venerates vanished without a trace, and Qin Mu was still the only one left on the Sea of Chaos. Cold sweat flowed down the back of Qin Mu's neck as he stood motionlessly on the Sea of Chaos. These 4 brats knew that it would be difficult for them to fight against the other 3, so they used the excuse of retreating. In truth, they were waiting for someone to take out the raw stone. The 3 of them would join hands to attack and heavily injure that person. His eyeballs spun around. Even though the 4 heavenly venerates had left, their chi aura had locked onto the place. Qin Mu was in the center, and he was locked onto by the chi aura of the 4 heavenly venerates. Even if he moved slightly, he would feel that he would disturb the chi aura of the 4 heavenly venerates and cause them to attack at the same time. Even if I can escape into the Sea of Chaos in an instant, I won't be able to escape death. His eyeballs spun rapidly, but no matter how he calculated, as long as he moved, what awaited him would be a path of death. The surroundings of the Sea of Chaos were eerily quiet. At that moment, the rocks on the shore cracked open, and a root drilled out of the ground. The root was gently probing and slowly spreading. Suddenly, an eye grew out of the thick root. It opened its eyes and looked around vigilantly. Cold sweat broke out on Qin Mu's forehead. Earth Mother Primordial Lord had also arrived. The appearance of Earth Mother Primordial Lord at this moment was simply adding insult to injury. More and more roots drilled out of the ground and gradually gathered together. After a moment, Earth Mother Primordial Lord slowly rose from the ground and looked at Qin Mu. But she didn't immediately make a move. She smiled and said, "Great mage, you have such a day? Run, why don't you continue to run?" Qin Mu's voice was slightly hoarse. "Earth Mother, there's no life or death feud between you and me, so I advise you not to get close to me," he said solemnly. The 4 heavenly venerates were nearby, and their chi and vitality were entangled, waiting for an opportunity to strike. "If you get close to me or touch me, you will attract their attacks." Primordial Lord Earth Mother revealed a doubtful expression and sized him up. She then observed her surroundings, but she didn't find any traces of the 4 heavenly venerates. She smiled and said, "I'll trust you this time." Qin Mu was stunned when he saw Earth Mother Primordial Lord actually burrow into the ground and disappear. Why did Earth Mother learn to be smarter? I even wanted to lure her out and use her corporeal body to block the attacks of the 4 heavenly venerates. Even if it was just for an instant, I could still escape. Qin Mu blinked and beads of sweat flowed down his forehead to his eyes. Earth Mother actually believed his words, which was truly out of his expectations. This day really didn't go well. Could there be someone scheming against me? Just as he thought of this, ripples suddenly appeared in the Sea of Chaos. Why are there suddenly waves in chaotic sea at this moment? Qin Mu's hair stood on end, and he cursed in his heart. He immediately rose into the sky and executed the great divine art he was best at without any explanation. He tried to escape into the void to avoid the attacks of the 4 heavenly venerates. At the instant his body moved, the auras of the 4 heavenly venerates were instantly drawn to each other and collided. There were different magic power and divine consciousness of the 4 heavenly venerates in this aura. At the instant they collided, Qin Mu immediately felt the circulation of his vital qi and divine consciousness becoming sluggish. His resurrection divine boat divine art couldn't take form at all and couldn't carry him into the void. "I'm doomed." Qin Mu's heart sank and he immediately made 2 preparations. With a buzz, his divine treasure territory opened up. He grabbed Heavenly Venerate Ling's peachwood hairpin with one hand and the chaos mineral vein in his divine treasure territory with the other. In the chaos mine of his divine treasure territory, 2 eggshells of great change flew up. This was his second preparation. If he couldn't even block Great Change's divine art, he was prepared to seal himself in Great Change's eggshell. As for whether Great Change's egg could block the attacks of the 4 heavenly venerates and protect himself, he didn't know. In the Supreme Beginning mine, the egg of Supreme Beginning also woke up from refining the Supreme Primordial Stone. The sky was as round as an egg, and the 2 eggshells surrounded Qin Mu's divine treasure territory. "Heavenly Venerate Mu, do you need help?" he asked immediately. Qin Mu didn't reply. At this moment, even Supreme Beginning was completely useless. The abilities of Supreme Beginning weren't strong enough to contend against the 4th Heavenly Venerate. Just as he was prepared, he saw a walking stick rising up from the Sea of Chaos and dispersing the chaotic qi. The 4 heavenly venerates didn't show themselves, but their divine arts had arrived. Even though Heavenly Venerate Shao, Heavenly Concubine Yen, Ancestral God King, and Divine Emperor Lang Xian had all suffered heavy injuries, their divine arts were still incomparably powerful and terrifying. The 4 heavenly venerates executed their full strength in this strike, forcing the other party to retreat. If they had appeared, it wouldn't have had such an effect. Just as their divine arts were about to reach Qin Mu's side, the inconspicuous walking stick came to a heavy stop. Qin Mu heard a loud boom, and the entire chaotic sea was sent flying by the walking stick. The divine arts of the 4 heavenly venerates were like paper, shattering under the terrifying impact. The huge waves raised by the chaotic sea crushed in all directions, squeezing the void until it collapsed. Suddenly, the figures of the 4 heavenly venerates appeared. They were lifted up by the waves of the chaotic sea and could not help but fly backward. The 4 heavenly venerates groaned and tried their best to stabilize their bodies. However, they could not stabilize their bodies in the face of this power. They were extremely shocked. This power even surpassed the physical body of the ancient god Celestial Emperor. It surpassed the complete form of the Supreme Emperor. They even felt that this power represented a realm that surpassed the limits of the celestial court. Who? The 4 heavenly venerates danced and were sent far away. The 4 of them landed on the ground and didn't say a word. They turned around and left, quickly disappearing in the 4 directions of the ancestral court. Underground, primordial Lord Earth Mother didn't go far. She secretly observed the movements of the chaotic sea, and when she saw this scene, she couldn't help shuddering a few times. She immediately dived underground and fled frantically. Gradually, the waves raised by the chaotic sea calmed down, and not long after, the ocean formed by the chaotic chi returned to normal. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and hurriedly placed Tai Yi's 2 eggshells back into the chaos mineral vein. He was bewildered. What's with this cane? The cane made 4th heavenly venerate retreat knowing that it was difficult, so it quieted down again and stood on the surface of the sea. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and walked forward to examine the cane carefully. There was nothing strange about it, as if it was carved out of ordinary wood. There were no runes on the walking stick, and not even the aura of the great Tao could be felt. However, it was this ordinary walking stick that had sent 4th heavenly venerate flying and made them retreat. Taoist brother, great change. Qin Mu bowed deeply to the ground and said sincerely, "Thank you for your help. The primordial stone should have fallen into Taoist brother's hands, right? I can rest assured now that the primordial stone is in your hands." He waited for a moment, but there was still no fluctuation or reaction from the walking stick.
Qin Mu smiled.
"Since Tao brother doesn't want to talk, I won't disturb you anymore. Farewell." After he said that, he turned around and left. After a moment, the sea of chaos split open, revealing a passageway. Su Shanghua, Lan Yutian and the rest walked out. Old man Tai waved his hand, and the walking stick flew back. Lan Yutian asked in bewilderment, "Why did Big Brother speak to the walking stick just now?" Old man Tai had a strange expression and explained, "He took me as a walking stick and thought I had turned into a walking stick today." The 2 of them were bewildered and didn't know why Qin Mu would have such a strange thought. However, they didn't know that Tai had it was impermanent and could transform into anyone or anything. Therefore, when Qin Mu saw the walking stick scare away the 4 heavenly venerates, he thought it was because Tai had turned into a walking stick. That was why he spoke to the walking stick in such a manner. The old man, great change, leaned on the walking stick. He smiled and said, "You guys have seen the dangers of the ancestral court and obtained the raw stones. You should be going to meet Heavenly Venerate Mu at the 100,000 Sacred Mountain. There are plenty of such wood at Heavenly Venerate Mu's place. The 100,000 Sacred Mountain is filled with such divine wood." Su Shanghua and Lan Yutian thanked him profusely. Su Shanghua asked, "May I ask, fellow Taoist, how do I get to the 100,000 Sacred Mountain?" "The 100,000 Sacred Mountain is right there. All of you keep walking in that direction. The Sacred Mountain is extremely unique, divine and extraordinary. You will recognize it the moment you see it." Old Tai casually pointed with his finger. Everyone looked in the direction he pointed, but they did not see anything. When they turned their heads around, old Tai had already disappeared. "What an extraordinary person," Su Shanghua praised. They continued to move forward. The more they looked at the geography of the mountains and rivers in the ancestral court of Su Shanghua Monastery, the more astonished they became. They couldn't help stopping to study the direction of the geography. The geography of the mountains and rivers here seems to contain the paths and skills of Earth Mother Primordial Lord. There are 36 types of Great Tao in Primordial City, and all of them can be found in the ancestral court. Lan Yutian didn't notice this and only noticed it after he said it. The 2 of them studied it and exchanged information, and their footsteps slowed down unknowingly. On the other side, Qin Mu rushed all the way to the 100,000 Black Mountains. When he saw the Black Mountains in sight, the space in front of him suddenly shook and he stopped. With a sneer, his divine consciousness burst forth. Boom! His divine consciousness exploded the space, and the 100,000 black mountains in front of him vanished without a trace. In their place was an incomparably huge head. It had long hair and the back of its head was facing him. Supreme Emperor, your injuries are too severe. You laid down an illusion to lure me, but I actually saw through it. Qin Mu revealed a smile and said indifferently, You are so heavily injured, yet you still dare to look for me? Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Ha ha ha, Heavenly Venerate Mu. You really think too highly of yourself. Supreme Emperor's incomparably huge head turned around. His face was covered in injuries, and a huge hole had appeared on his forehead. He smiled and said, This little injury of mine is nothing. As long as I have the primordial stone, it won't take long for me to recover. Heavenly Venerate Mu, take out the remaining 1/4 of the primordial stone and I'll spare your life. I've already given that primordial stone to Heavenly Venerate Shao. Qin Mu said with a smile that wasn't a smile, Furthermore, if you spare my life, I'm afraid the current you won't be able to do it. Supreme Emperor, I chased after Heavenly Venerate Hao for 600,000 miles and he was saved by Tai Su. That's his good fortune. Today. He slowly pulled out the broken sword and said indifferently, I'm afraid you won't have such a good life. Supreme Emperor's head was like a mountain, giving Qin Mu the feeling of 100,000 black mountains. Of course, that was because Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness was interfering with his thoughts and consciousness, creating an illusion for him. Supreme Emperor wasn't famous for his divine consciousness illusions. His attainments in them were far inferior to Celestial Master Gong's. His divine consciousness rippled, causing the void to shake. This was also the reason why Qin Mu could see through him. Heavenly Venerate Mu, you are becoming more and more arrogant. Supreme Emperor's long hair was in a pile. He had natural curly hair and it was long. When it was curled up, he was furious and the pile of curly hair fluttered in the wind. In my lifespan of billions of years, you are just a little grasshopper that can only jump from spring to autumn, he said indifferently. Before he could finish his words, Qin Mu's divine treasure domain erupted. The domain of his divine treasure roared and expanded. Supreme Emperor sneered, and his wavy hair fluttered like huge snakes. Even if Qin Mu's divine treasure domain expanded to its limit, it would only cover his head. Supreme Emperor's head took up nearly half of the space in Qin Mu's divine treasure domain. In front of this huge head, Qin Mu's floating heavenly palace and heavenly court also seemed insignificant. They were like tiny cities floating in front of him. Qin Mu's main body, on the other hand, seemed even more insignificant. A smile appeared on Supreme Emperor's face as he looked at the shadows of ancient gods in the domain. He sneered. This is your domain, not bad at all. However, I'm the one who created it. From ancient times until now, among the billions of cultivators, I'm the first to create a domain. I'm the pioneer. You dare to use your supreme divine consciousness domain in front of me? Qin Mu laughed loudly and rose into the sky. The broken sword in his hand returned to its original form, and sword lights flickered as he stabbed toward Supreme Emperor. He had used his sword path domain. Sword path domain was one of the domains in his divine treasures. At that moment the sword domain erupted, and the gods in it unleashed their magic power and path paths. The heavenly Tao of Xiandu, the great Tao of Yudu, and the great Tao of Yuandu. With the addition of ancient god for extreme heavens, heavenly Yin returning ruins, and the other ancient gods of the heavens, the power of his sword reached its peak. Supreme Emperor was expressionless as he looked at the sword light flying over. He indeed didn't dare to use his supreme divine consciousness domain. If he did, he would die. Qin Mu had already cultivated heavenly venerate Ling's not easy divine art. If he used his supreme divine consciousness domain, his domain would instantly turn into a sharp weapon that could attack him and trap him to death. However, what he knew wasn't just his supreme divine consciousness domain. His other body, Qi Tian Consort, as one of the 10 heavenly venerates, didn't cultivate divine consciousness. Ever since heavenly venerate Yun, Ling, and Yu had killed him in Great Void, he had realized that there was a huge flaw in his divine consciousness. Therefore, after he had transformed into Qi Tian Consort, the path he had taken wasn't the old path of divine consciousness becoming the Tao. In fact, the path he had taken was the same as the other heavenly venerates. He had used the identity of Empress Qi to gather all the divine arts, paths and skills in the world to cultivate vital qi as his main focus, studying the Tao of innate state to become himself. On this path, he was already one of the 10 people with the highest achievements in the world. His long hair fluttered in the wind like huge dragons as they met Qin Mu's sword domain. The sword domain instantly erupted, and countless crisp sounds of steel clashing rang out. The long hair was cut off by Qin Mu's sword domain and fell off his head. The long hair that fell off twisted, and they suddenly transformed into ferocious black dragons that pounced at Qin Mu with bared fangs and brandished claws. Even more of Supreme Emperor's long hair flew over like long dragons dancing in the air. They were incomparably sharp, blocking Qin Mu's sword domain head-on and even turning defense into offense. The strands of long hair were like the sharpest sword in the world, the fiercest dragon and the sharpest spear. They attacked Qin Mu and pierced through his sword domain. Qin Mu held the sword in one hand and pressed his other hand on the heart of his brows. The vertical eye on the heart of his brows opened, and the black dragons that had transformed back into black hair instantly fell down from the sky. Not easy divine art? Supreme Emperor frowned. The divine art that Qin Mu had executed was not easy divine art, and it directly returned his hair back to its original form. Could it be that I can't use any divine consciousness divine art in front of this brat? Qin Mu's sword light had already arrived in front of him, and it cut through his long hair. It was about to pierce into the hole in the center of his brows. I won't waste any more words with you. Supreme Emperor suddenly opened his mouth and roared. The terrifying sound wave shattered the space, and Qin Mu's sword domain instantly shattered. It wasn't just sword domain that shattered. There were also Xian Du Yidu and Yuan Du. The gods in Qin Mu's divine treasure domain collapsed one after another. The starry sky was destroyed, the earth evaporated and earth, water, wind and fire spewed out. It was like the sign of the end of the world. Qin Mu faced his fierce might, but he revealed a smile. The sword light in his hand suddenly dispersed, and his corporeal body expanded crazily. His corporeal body was entangled like a giant that had split open the heavens and earth. His spirit and body were one, and his god and body were one. He was facing the roar of Supreme Emperor's head on. On the surface of his body, his tendons and flesh were constructed into various runic patterns. A large bell was suspended above his head. The sound of the bell shook, and the power of creation was extraordinary. It allowed the shattered divine treasure domain to instantly recover and complete, and the destroyed gods were resurrected one after another. The 15th heaven of the divine ability. The power of creation had been unlocked. His entire divine treasure domain suddenly shrank in an instant and entered his body. Gods of all sizes lived in all the apertures of his body. The 18th heaven of divine arts. Death of God of Crimson Light. The era of Crimson Light was divided into the era of Crimson Emperor and the era of Bright Emperor. One primordial spirit created the strongest primordial spirit, while the other created the corporeal body, creating the strongest corporeal body. At that moment, the techniques of Bright Emperor and Crimson Emperor were displayed to the fullest on his body. Qin Mu's corporeal body was huge, and when he stood in front of Supreme Emperor's head, his body wasn't the slightest bit smaller than Supreme Emperor's head. The crisp sounds of metal clashing could be heard, and incomparably thick arms drilled out from under Qin Mu's armpits. His head actually turned into 3 heads and 6 arms. Bam bam bam. In an instant countless fists landed on Supreme Emperor's face, sending his incomparably huge head flying backward. Supreme Emperor's head rumbled, and he was beaten senseless. Suddenly, Qin Mu's feet came to a stop, and a divine boat appeared under his feet. It crossed the sky and chased after him. Resurrection divine boat crossing. At the bow of the boat, the layers of heavenly palaces were crisscrossed behind Qin Mu. The heavenly palaces were arranged and combined, and in an instant, they turned into a heavenly court that was resplendent in gold and jade. Qin Mu's qi and blood instantly rose to their limits. Blood light shone on half of the sky, dyeing it scarlet red. The shadows of countless ancient gods appeared in the sky, fighting and killing. It was like a fierce battle between the heroes of the era of Long Han, replaying the tragic scene of the struggle for supremacy in the world. Supreme Emperor looked at the blood-red sky and saw that Qin Mu's heavenly court had split into 3. The situation of the 3 heavenly courts in the era of Long Han was actually reenacted. This is a divine art of creation. It was actually refined to such an extent by him. Supreme Emperor's heart trembled. Qin Mu's move was the 17th heaven of the divine art that had entered the path. Yet Long Han was fighting against him. Long Han was fighting against each other. And the killing intent of this great divine art filled the sky. It seemed to have gathered all the fierceness of the struggle for supremacy of Long Han into one move. Long Han, Shao Han, Long Shao. The three great heavenly courts were fighting for the legitimacy of the heavenly emperor. And there were countless schemes and tricks. All of them converged in one move. That era was magnificent and tragic. There were 9 heavenly venerables teaching the way to the world. Heavenly Emperor Absolute beginning controlling the power and toying with all living things. Earth Count reincarnating as Acho, dragging Yudu to battle the heavenly court, Yun, Ling, and Yu Taishu beheading Supreme Emperor. There were heavenly venerables plotting against heavenly emperor execution. Heavenly venerables Haotian scheming against Crown Prince Xia Wuqi. The Empress of the Emperor dying in the returning ruins. Heavenly venerables Ling banishing ghost ship Yulin army. And the dragon and Han swallowing Shao Han and Long Shao. Supreme Emperor was a person who had personally experienced that period of time. The feeling that Qin Mu's move gave him made him feel as if he had returned to that era of great war. An era where even the giants who had dominated the primordial lands could fall at any moment. Boom. Qin Mu's dragon and Han fought over this great divine art and heavily struck Supreme Emperor's head. It crashed into the void and vanished from the sky of the ancestral court. The resurrection divine boat under Qin Mu's feet dispersed, and his body stood erect in the sky. His 3 heads looked in all directions and the vertical eye in the heart of his brows opened. His 3 eyes were focused on the movements in the void. Supreme Emperor, you aren't afraid, are you? His voice was like gangrene that was attached to the bone, and it followed closely behind Supreme Emperor's head as it passed through layers of void space, entering Supreme Emperor's ears with incomparable clarity. As the strongest emperor of the immemorial era, you have been dealt with by Heavenly Venerate Yun, Heavenly Venerate Ling, Heavenly Venerate Vast, and the 4 Heavenly Venerates Lang, Shao, Yen, and Ancestor. Your life is a life of failure. Run. Supreme Emperor's head swept through the layers of void with a gloomy expression. He could clearly hear Qin Mu's voice and could also clearly see Qin Mu's figure. His head was changing, and his flesh and blood were growing. His technique was the strongest technique in the world. Great overarching supreme divine consciousness. Even if he didn't have primordial stone, he could still forcefully repair his corporeal body. However, using divine consciousness to repair his corporeal body was far inferior to primordial stone. His injuries were extremely serious, and his divine consciousness was even more severely injured. Using divine consciousness to repair his corporeal body would leave him with a huge hidden danger. Continue to escape. Qin Mu's voice still rang out. This isn't difficult for you. After all, you have been running for 1,000,000 years, and you don't even dare to turn into a man. You only dare to turn into a woman and hide in the Heavenly Emperor's harem, forcing a smile on your face. The Grand Supreme Emperor, the first Heavenly Emperor who ruled the universe, actually turned into a woman and relied on the Heavenly Emperor's harem to compete with the Heavenly Emperor's concubines for favor, selling smiles to survive. Supreme Emperor's expression became even gloomier. Suddenly, his curly hair spread out and pierced through the void, locking his head in place. He stopped in the 27th layer of the void, and his hair extended in all directions like a sea urchin, locking him in place. His supreme divine consciousness circulated at full speed, and the remaining divine consciousness was used to visualize his corporeal body. Without a corporeal body, he felt that he wouldn't be able to fight against a celestial venerable like Qin Mu, who had established his path with the divine art. He had to use his complete corporeal body. In the early years of Dragon Han, the reason why Qin Mu had been conferred the title of Celestial Venerable was because of his divine art establishing his path. In the past, Qin Mu had still looked very green, but now his name had come true. His divine art had already achieved establishing his path, becoming a true Celestial Venerable Mu. Such an existence was worthy of respect, and it was also worthy of Supreme Emperor's battle. Flesh and blood grew under his neck, and soon, his chest grew out, and his 4 limbs grew out. Supreme Emperor kept visualizing, using his last divine consciousness to forge a new corporeal body. You became Heaven Consort Chi, so you might have made some achievements, But you did it all by relying on your face, your figure, and your smile, right? Qin Mu's voice was extremely vicious. It entered his mind. You've hidden your whole life. When will you dare to fight openly like a man? Could it be that you've forgotten that you're a man after being a woman for so long? Supreme Emperor's expression was cold as his head gradually shrunk. He tried his best to make his body no different from a normal creator. Qin Mu didn't speak anymore. The corners of Supreme Emperor's eyes twitched. At that moment he felt Qin Mu's gaze. It passed through the 27th layer of void and landed on his body, finding his exact location. Supreme Emperor closed his eyes and executed Great Luo's Supreme Divine Consciousness. Instantly, all kinds of lights shone in the 27th layer of void, and gods appeared one after another, imprinting themselves into the orifices of his body. This method was very similar to Qin Mu's divine body of bright red. But compared to Qin Mu, he was the real deal. Qin Mu had learned Great Luo's Supreme Divine Consciousness, so he could combine it with the path of creation to refine the divine body of bright red. However, no matter how strong Qin Mu's divine art of creation was, it was impossible for him to return to the ancient times and see those ancient gods that had already died. Even though there were many ancient gods in the apertures of Qin Mu's body, only the great Tao runes of the 365 ancient gods were complete. He had never seen the other ancient gods before. That was because those ancient gods had already died and been exterminated before the Dragon Han. In the Battle of the Immemorial Era, there had been a huge number of creators who had died, but the ancient gods that had died accounted for more than half of all the ancient gods. At that time there had been a total of more than 1,900 ancient gods. I was revered as Supreme Emperor, and I didn't just rely on the sacrifice of the Creator to obtain it. I was revered as the strongest corporeal body, and I also didn't rely on the sacrifice of the Creator to obtain it. Instead, I relied on my intelligence and my foundation to obtain it. He suddenly roared and his long hair was pulled back from the void. He stood in the 27th layer of the void. His curly long hair was pulled straight and fell on his shoulders. His muscles were ferocious and filled with boundless strength. He exposed his chest. This was the most perfect physical body of the Creator. His muscles were perfect in algebra and carried a shocking beauty. It was his pride. He was the most beautiful man in the prehistoric Creator race. He was also the most intelligent and powerful person. Bo Yang's vicissitudes, Gong Gong's beauty, and Shu Jun's heroism were nothing in front of him. He used his masculinity, his strength, and his intelligence and charm to conquer the Creator of the prehistoric era. He made the three kings submit, the ancient gods worship him, and he became the Supreme Emperor. Ever since the end of the prehistoric era, when he had been defeated by Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning, he had rarely used his intelligence and strength to fight with his full strength. He used to scatter his strength, and it turned into a great Hong and a bright rain. He had turned into Qing Tianfei, and he had used schemes and plots to seize power. And now, he would recreate the masculinity of the Creator, the beauty of masculinity, to defeat Qin Mu, to defeat this little brat. He waited quietly for Qin Mu's arrival. Whoosh! The Paramitha divine boat traversed through the void and appeared in front of him. Qin Mu's clothes fluttered as he stood at the bow of the divine boat. Only when the divine boat came to a stop did his fluttering clothes calm down. Celestial Emperor Mu, Supreme Emperor said with a deep voice. Qin Mu bowed slightly. Supreme Emperor. Please. Please. Supreme Emperor shouted out, and the more than 1,900 ancient gods in his body mobilized their power at the same time. They made his body float and flash, crushing the 27 layers of void until it was destroyed. At the next moment he came in front of Qin Mu, the overlord of the immemorial era, the one and only emperor. His domineering aura was all in a single punch. He threw a punch. Boom! The two fists collided, and the two huge figures separated from each other and fell backward. They crushed the void, creating thunder and lightning in it. There was blood light in the lightning, and it was the blood that burst forth from the skin of their bodies. Sinkhole Wen Qi birth. Qin Mu let out a long roar in anger and stopped his body. He then rushed forward like a stream of light, and a sinkhole great abyss appeared under his feet. The innate Wen Qi above his head was connected to the great abyss, and a lotus flower with two roots appeared in the great abyss. the innate one qi above his head turned into a lotus flower, and his body spun rapidly. His 3 heads and 6 arms punched out countless times in an instant. Monarch Tai roared and charged at him. A mere sinkhole Mao Shun was not even able to withstand a single blow from me. Primordial Qi birth was the 12th heaven of Qin Mu's divine art that had entered the path. The most powerful part of this move was that it devoured the strength of the enemy, causing the lotus flowers in the great abyss to sway. It could then swallow the strength of the enemy's divine art into the great abyss, turning it into innate qi that would fall from the lotus flowers on top of his head and feed back to his body. The inborn one qi grew stronger, and the power of the divine art grew stronger, causing even more damage to the enemy. This was a divine art he had created based on heavenly venerate clear heavens means in Great Void Devil region. It could be said that he had absorbed heavenly venerate clear heaven's wisdom. However, Qin Mu wasn't heavenly venerate clear heaven after all. He didn't have the bloodline of Heavenly Emperor Absolute Beginning and Empress Yuanmu, but his research on the inborn one qi and the path of returning ruins wasn't inferior to heavenly venerate clear heavens in the slightest. In fact, he had even surpassed heavenly venerate clear heaven's wisdom. He had obtained the great Dao runes in the Guardian Pavilion of Dao Ancestor. The runes in the Guardian Pavilion used algebra to analyze the great Dao of the ancient gods, which included the great Dao runes in Heavenly Emperor Primordial Qi's corporeal body. Qin Mu had also obtained the corporeal bodies of Empress and Madam Prime Minister, so he had a thorough understanding of the great Dao of the corporeal bodies of the 2 ancient gods. At the same time, he had used microscopic algebra to make up for the shortcomings of Dao Ancestor. However, with this point, heavenly venerate vast heaven's understanding of innately one qi and the path of returning ruins might not be able to compare. Furthermore, the eggshell of the heavenly emperor was in the center of his brows, so he had even started to come into contact with the path of absolute beginning. If they were to fight on the same realm and used innately one qi and the path of returning ruins, heavenly venerate vast heaven would have the advantage of his bloodline, and the power of his divine arts would be extremely tyrannical. Qin Mu, on the other hand, would have the advantage of having a deeper understanding of the Tao of absolute beginning and sinkhole, so he might not be weaker than Heavenly Emperor Hao. At the instant the 2 of them collided, Supreme Emperor immediately felt his own power pouring out and being devoured by the great abyss of sinkhole under Qin Mu's feet. Under this situation he would definitely become weaker and weaker.
Bang bang bang.
Their fists were like light and lightning, and their speed was extremely fast. Their bodies moved even faster, and in the blink of an eye, they had struck from one end of the void to the other. Qin Mu relied on his 3 heads and 6 arms, and the speed of his attacks was dazzling. In an instant countless fists poured down. Every time Supreme Emperor received a punch from him, he felt the power in his body drain away. He was devoured by the other party. His power flowed into the other party's fists and arms, into his body, through his legs, and into the great abyss of returning ruins. When he reached great abyss of returning ruins, he immediately lost the ability to sense his own power. He should have been devoured and refined by great abyss, turning into innately one qi. Ever since he had resurrected, he had obtained a connection with his other body, Qi Tianfei. He had used his incomparably dense cultivation to open his divine treasure Heavenly Palace, becoming an existence of 34 heavenly palaces in a single leap, making up for his lack of vital qi. However, in the battle with 4th Heavenly Venerate, his heavenly palace had almost been completely destroyed. Now the essence qi in the shattered heavenly palace was flowing out crazily and surging into Qin Mu's body. At that moment he no longer had the means to control the loss of essence qi. Boom! He was struck by Qin Mu's move once more, and his majestic body continuously crashed through layers of void, falling from the 27th layer to the 10th layer. Blood kept spurting out of his eyes, ears, mouth and nose. He raised his head to look, but the void that had been smashed through had yet to close. Qin Mu rushed down crazily from the hole in the 17th layer, and his body spun. Countless fists flew out, forming a huge object formed by countless fists. It was like the most precise machine that filled his vision. At that moment, Qin Mu used his martial path divine art. The martial path primordial spirit and martial spirit of the old farmers wuxia, one of the 4 great heavenly masters of founding emperor, were unleashed to the fullest under his fists. Supreme Emperor raised his hand to wipe away the blood at the corner of his mouth and immediately changed his move. Dozens of tattered heavenly palaces suddenly flew out from behind him. All of his heavenly palaces had been beaten to a pulp by the fourth heavenly venerate, and his body's vital essence was constantly being lost. However, it was as if he couldn't feel how heavy his injuries were. With a loud shout, he saw all the heavenly palaces collapsing at that moment. His aura instantly weakened rapidly. Qin saw the advantage and was about to execute Guishu Ichi to seize his cultivation and magic power, when a new heavenly palace rose from the collapsed heavenly palace. Qin heart jumped, and he immediately sensed danger. His diving momentum instantly stopped, and he flew back, rising up from the numerous holes in the void that had yet to close. Supreme Emperor's heavenly palace was remodeling at a terrifying speed, and the aura of the heavenly palace gave Qin a very familiar feeling. It was none other than Divine Consciousness' great overarching heavenly palace. Supreme Emperor knew that he didn't have much of his cultivation left. If his magic power was scattered into other heavenly palaces, it would definitely be difficult for him to resist Qin divine arts. He might as well destroy the other heavenly palaces and gather the energy of all the heavenly palaces. Remodeling Divine Consciousness' great overarching heavenly palace. Only in this way could he gather all his power to kill Qin in the shortest amount of time. The instant his Divine Consciousness' great overarching heavenly palace was formed, the phantom of his primordial spirit shook and appeared on the Emperor's seat of great overarching heavenly palace's Lingshao Treasure Hall. It was sitting in a dangerous posture. The primordial spirit projection of Supreme Emperor. Emperor's might rushed into the sky and pierced through layers of void space. The Emperor sat on the throne of the Hall of Supreme Heaven Palace and ruled over the world, commanding all the heroes. He had his own imposing manner. Supreme Emperor had been the ruler of the primordial age for hundreds of millions of years, and his emperor's might was even above that of Heavenly Emperor's primordial age. The corners of Qin eyes twitched. This emperor's might gave people the feeling that he could be an enemy, and even his Tao heart was affected. Even though Supreme Emperor wasn't a complete emperor's throne realm and didn't have a complete primordial spirit, the pressure he felt was incomparably terrifying. At the same time as his body retreated explosively, he immediately executed his divine art, Paramitha divine boat crossing, and he passed through layers of void. At an even faster speed. With two loud bangs, he rushed into the 29th void. At the same time, another divine art of his burst forth, allowing him to enter a realm where he could forget everything in a short period of time. His body was illusory and real, making it impossible for anyone to attack him, making it impossible for Supreme Emperor's aura to lock onto him.
Heavenly Venerate mu kropka.
Supreme Emperor raised his head and looked up at Qin who had already arrived at the 29th void. His gaze passed through the layers of closed void, where Qin stood at the bow of the divine boat. His cape spread out like wings, it covered the divine boat. The robe and cape on his body weren't ordinary items, but were the clothes of Emperor Yun Luo, Wei Suifeng. It was also an emperor's robe, and when it was spread out, it was extremely gorgeous. Looking up from the bottom, the stars swirled around and the stars were like clouds. Qin divine art of divine body of crimson bright had made his corporeal body incomparably strong. He was also 30,000 yards tall and incomparably astonishing. The divine art of the Paramitha divine boat appeared to be quite small under his feet, but it could barely accommodate his body. However, Supreme Emperor was extremely far away from him, so when he looked up, he could only see Qin standing on the divine boat. His robe and cape were like a nebula, and they weren't much bigger than usual. The two of them were separated by 11 layers of void, and they seemed to be standing still. If we divide them by the realm of divine treasure Heavenly Palace, your current realm should have reached the peak of Lingshao. Amazing, very amazing. Before Supreme Emperor finished his words, his figure had already arrived at the 29th void. The two of them were up and down and they were very far apart. In each other's eyes, the other's figure had already become very huge. You didn't walk through the system of divine treasure Heavenly Palace, but relied on your intelligence to achieve this step. This is the most admirable part. Therefore, Supreme Emperor's body moved again, and he came in front of Qin in the next moment. You can be proud even if you die under my divine arts of divine consciousness, great overarching heaven. Qin Mu's hair stood on end, and his body moved. The divine boat under his feet rushed into the higher void, and at the same time, all kinds of divine arts erupted. Great Tao rises from the ancestral court. Good fortune unfurls. Divine consciousness path moves first. All sorts of great divine arts poured out like they didn't care about their lives, as they welcomed the approaching divine consciousness, great overarching heaven. In great overarching heaven, Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness path flower had already bloomed, and the Tao fruit was still green. At this moment, Qin Mu saw the tree in great overarching heaven clearly. It was the world tree. It was also his current territory in the ancestral court. The great black tree was only the complete great black tree that had yet to be cut down and burned. At the end of Tao realm, in great overarching heaven, is one's own great Tao, blooming Tao flowers and forming Tao fruits on the world tree? Qin Mu didn't have time to think too much. The divine art in his hand changed, and the dragon and Han fought against each other, bursting forth with the vastness and fierceness of the era of dragon and Han. The divine body of crimson light allowed his corporeal body and primordial spirit to be as one, and his spirit and body became one with his body. The path of the upper emperor was completed, and eternal peace began to fight for the path of the empress. The power of a great divine art burst forth, and it made him feel as if he had walked through the history of 1,000,000 years from dragon and Han in a short moment. He had experienced the tragic and stirring history of the ancestors of generations. His spirit, chi, and spirit reached an unprecedented peak at that moment. Even so, any divine art of his that came into contact with Supreme Emperor's divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, was immediately routed and disintegrated without any power left. Divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, could be said to be the most perfect divine art Qin Mu had ever seen. It was even more perfect than heavenly venerate vast heaven's innate one chi and great Tao of sinkhole. It was even more outstanding and inconceivable. The power of Tao flower, Tao fruit, gave people an irresistible feeling. Only now did he understand why heavenly venerate clear heaven's primordial spirit was trapped in divine consciousness, great overarching heaven's divine art, and couldn't escape. Supreme Emperor's understanding of the path of divine consciousness had completely surpassed an existence like heavenly venerate clear heaven. Heavenly venerate clear heaven's Tao realm hadn't reached Supreme Emperor's level, so he couldn't rely on his own path to break it. In the end, he could only use brute force. Heavenly venerate clear heaven at that time didn't have such power at all. If I were to be trapped inside, I'd probably be even worse off than heavenly venerate vast heaven. My corporeal body and primordial spirit would be dissolved, turning into Supreme Emperor's path of divine consciousness. Qin Mu let out a long howl, and his body had already entered the 30th layer of the void. In the 30th layer of the void, his corporeal body and primordial spirit had been greatly suppressed. It was an incomparably dangerous void, and he had basically reached his limit. His corporeal body began to crumble and turn illusory, his skin leaving his body. And at that moment, as eternal peace fought to use this move, his essence, chi, and spirit had also reached an unprecedented peak. He broke through again and again, surpassing his limits again and again. Taisu suddenly opened the chaotic pod. He suddenly became somewhat clumsy, and the divine ability in his hand became very clumsy. He was trembling as he used the 22nd layer of divine ability. Taisu suddenly opened her chaos pod, and when this move was executed, her path of Taisu turned into a round egg that fell into divine consciousness, great overarching heaven. When this divine art had just arrived in great overarching heaven, the round egg suddenly burst open, and her path of Taisu gushed out, turning into a goddess. Her palms split outwards, and the entire divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, became extremely turbid. The path of Taisu had form and substance. Goddess Taisu pointed at the sky with one hand and the ground with the other. Clear chi floated up and turbid chi sank down. Divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, instantly became sluggish. Qin Mu's body was still retreating and floating towards the height of the 30th void. He found it difficult to control his body, as if the void was turning him into an illusion and floating him even higher. His arms flew up and down, and his vital chi transformed into all kinds of great Tao runes, but it was even more clumsy. His mudra was finally formed, and the vertical eye in the heart of his brows opened. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes, one black and one white. He executed the 23rd divine art of Tao realm, Taiji, evolving into yin and yang movement. Wang. The gaze shot into divine consciousness, great overarching heaven, and the yin and yang qi revolved around goddess Tai Su, destroying the Tao flower and causing the Tao fruit to fall off. Divine consciousness, great overarching heaven collapsed and disintegrated. Astonishment and disbelief appeared on the face of Supreme Emperor. He gritted his teeth and moved closer, slapping his palm at Qin Mu. Qin Mu's body continued to rise into the sky, approaching the 31st layer of void. That layer of void was a place that he absolutely couldn't reach. If he reached there, his corporeal body and primordial spirit would definitely be completely turned into nothingness and cease to exist. But now he was fighting Supreme Emperor with all his strength and had reached a critical juncture. He couldn't control his body at all. There seemed to be a terrifying power supporting him in the void, making him continue to rise. This was somewhat similar to his divine art, Great Overarching Heaven, which was to borrow the power of the void to imitate Great Overarching Heaven and turn the gods into nothingness, turning them into a thin piece of paper without any thickness. And to the 30th void, the power of the void will be so strong that even he cannot contend with the degree. The Emperor's palm force came to his body. The Emperor is not to kill him, but to put him into the 31st layer of the void. Let the void will obliterate him. He broke the Emperor's consciousness of the great Luo Tian, although let the Emperor shocked, but also let the Emperor see the hope of killing him. His body had already started to flatten, and his corporeal body had started to lose its thickness. He could no longer control himself as he floated higher. At that moment, Qin Mu executed his divine art even more clumsily. This divine art was crooked, and it was completely unlike the ugly divine art that celestial venerables like him could execute. As a celestial venerate who had established the path of his divine art, Qin Mu's divine art had always combined the beauty of the atmosphere and the path, but this divine art didn't have the beauty of the great path at all. Yet at that moment the clear voice of the path sounded out. It was as if millions upon millions of lives and gods had appeared at that moment and were calling out the same name in unison. Path of ultimate beginning. Form without substance. On the 24th heaven of divine arts entering the path, the form of ultimate beginning questioned Qing Ming. Qin Mu's palm struck out and met Supreme Emperor's palm. When their palms collided, Supreme Emperor revealed a smile. Immediately after, the smile on his face froze, and it turned into astonishment. The astonishment on his face became denser and denser. He saw the flesh and blood on his palm peel back, and the material that made up his palm seemed to have turned into countless particles that were flying away from him. The same thing happened to his arm as well. The fine particles could be seen with the naked eye, and they flew backward like fog. Soon they spread to his shoulders, chest, other arm and feet. He stood there and felt that his body was still there. His body was still complete, but there were no bones, no flesh and blood. The body below his neck had turned into a transparent form that only had a body and no matter. His vital qi, his divine consciousness, great overarching heaven palace, and his 7 great divine treasures had all turned into a strange state that had no form or substance. Only his head had not been assimilated by Qin Mu's palm because it was his true body. After all, Supreme Emperor's corporeal body had gone through countless tempering, and he had also gone through the worship and refinement of countless creators. Even though Qin Mu's great divine art was extremely exquisite, it couldn't melt his head in a moment. Even though it couldn't melt his head, the vital qi in his head had been dissolved, and his divine consciousness became unstable. It became weaker and weaker.
Suddenly, Qin Mu's
palm clenched into a fist and punched into the hole in the heart of Supreme Emperor's brows. This punch was majestic, and the martial path was all-conquering. It turned his brain into a paste and dispersed his divine consciousness. Supreme Emperor's head fell from the 30th void.